As you ease into a place of comfort, notice how your breath begins to slow, lengthen, and soften. The world around you gently recedes, its edges blurring as your imagination quietly opens. Ordinary sounds melt away and become the faint stirring of leaves, the distant call of birds greeting the morning. Without effort, you find yourself walking along a narrow earthen path in an ancient Japanese countryside, the ground firm yet forgiving beneath your feet. The air is cool and fresh against your skin, carrying with it the delicate sweetness of cherry blossoms drifting down from trees that arch over the trail. Each step produces a muted sound, a private rhythm that seems to belong only to you. As the path curves slightly, a modest dwelling appears ahead. It is a small house with a thatched roof, simple and unadorned, paper lanterns swaying gently near the entrance, as if breathing with the day. This is the home of Hakuin, a Zen master widely known for his insight and quiet compassion. You linger beneath a flowering tree and observe as children gather in his small garden. He speaks with them softly, his eyes creasing into an easy smile, his presence both gentle and steady. Throughout the morning, villagers come and go, asking for guidance on matters trivial and weighty alike. Each leaves with a lighter step, as though something unseen has been set down. There is an unmistakable calm that seems to emanate from Hakuin, not as an effort, but as a natural state of being. Time passes while you remain in the village, learning its patterns, its silences, its familiar faces. One afternoon, however, a subtle unrest ripples through the air. Whispers gather near the well, glances are exchanged and quickly withdrawn. A young woman from a respected family has discovered she is pregnant. The news spreads quietly at first, then with growing urgency. Under the heavy pressure of her parents, fear and shame, she names Hakuin as the father. The accusation moves through the village like a sudden chill. The next morning, raised voices draw you toward Hakuin's garden. The woman's parents stand before him, anger etched deeply into their faces. Her father's words strike sharply into the peaceful air, accusing Hakuin of dishonor and deception. You feel tension rise in your own body as you wait for his response, expecting denial, defense, or outrage. Hakuin listens without interruption, his expression open and attentive. When the parents finally fall silent, breathless from their fury, he speaks only 3 quiet words, so softly they almost dissolve as soon as they appear. "Is that so?" The simplicity of his reply sends a strange wave through you, part confusion, part awe. There is no explanation, no protest, no attempt to correct the story. The parents, stunned at first, become even more incensed, mistaking his calm for indifference. They leave, vowing to spread word of his disgrace. In the days that follow, the village shifts noticeably. Those who once bowed deeply now avert their eyes. Children no longer play in the garden. Murmurs trail behind Hakuin wherever he walks. Yet nothing in his daily rhythm changes. He continues to meditate in the early light, tend his plants, draw water from the well. When confronted or whispered about, his response never varies. "Is that so?" Seasons turn, blossoms fade into summer green, then yield to the gold of autumn. One winter morning, snow falling in a quiet, steady vale, a firm knock sounds at Hakuin's door. The young woman has given birth. Her parents stand outside, placing the swaddled infant into Hakuin's arms, declaring that he must now care for the child before leaving without another word. You stand nearby, feeling the cold on your face, watching closely for sorrow or fear to surface. Instead, Hakuin looks down at the infant with gentle eyes, and repeats the same soft phrase. "Is that so?" Without hesitation, he brings the child inside, into warmth and light. You find yourself helping as he adjusts to this new life. A cradle is fashioned from a simple basket and lined with cloth. He visits neighbors to ask for milk and advice, learning patiently how to care for an infant. His days, once shaped by teaching and meditation, now revolve entirely around feeding, soothing, and watching over this small being. Judgment continues to circulate, but Hakuin meets it as he meets everything else. Is that so? Months pass, marked by the child's cries in the night, by handmade toys, by soft lullabies sung under the moon. You witness first smiles, tentative steps, moments of simple joy shared without possession. A full year unfolds in this way. Then spring returns, and with it drifting blossoms once more. One morning, you see the young woman and her parents approaching the house. Their faces are transformed, no longer tight with anger, but heavy with shame. They bow deeply before Hakuin and confess the truth. He is not the father. The real father is a young man from the market. They beg forgiveness and promise to restore his name. You search Hakuin's face for relief, resentment, or vindication. None appears. With the same steady presence, he gently returns the child he has raised for a year into their arms. As apologies and promises spill forth, his reply remains unchanged. Is that so? Standing there in the morning light, something subtle loosens within you. You begin to sense the freedom in his response, a freedom born not of withdrawal, but of meeting each moment without clinging or resistance. It becomes clear that his words were never an expression of apathy. They were the voice of a mind, unburdened by the need to defend an image of itself, untouched by circumstances it could not control. As this understanding settles, you recognize how differently you might have acted, how much energy would have gone into protecting reputation, nurturing resentment, or holding tightly to attachment. Hakuin's response reveals a deeper balance, an embodied equanimity that accepts life as it unfolds, warm and awake, like the deep ocean remaining calm beneath restless waves. As that realization quietly takes root within you, your awareness begins to shift again. The scene around you softens, as if gently exhaling. You carry the echo of Hakuin's calm into your own body, noticing your breath moving with a slower, steadier rhythm. The sense of weight fades, and your mind drifts naturally to another time and place. Familiar sounds dissolve and are replaced by the soft brushing of bamboo leaves and the distant, continuous murmur of water flowing over stone. You find yourself walking along a stone path that winds upward through a mountain monastery in Japan. The air here is cool and clean, tasting faintly of pine and mist. Dew clings to spider webs stretched between branches, catching the early light. As you round a corner, a quiet courtyard opens before you, where young monks move through their morning tasks with practiced attention. One figure draws your eye. A young monk named Tsui moves with care and precision, his gestures calm yet infused with a certain eagerness. He has been here long enough to absorb the monastery's rhythm, yet there is still an openness in him, a readiness to learn. You watch as he finishes sweeping fallen leaves from the stone path, each stroke deliberate, each leaf gathered without hurry. As he sets aside his broom, an older monk approaches. This is the Zen master Nansen, known throughout the region for his clarity and discipline. Though advanced in years, his presence is sharp and alert, his movements unexpectedly light, his eyes, bright beneath heavy white brows, miss nothing. Calling Tsui by name, He asks him to bring a pail of water to cool his bath. Taisui bows and moves quickly to comply. You follow at a respectful distance as he retrieves a wooden bucket and carries it to an ancient well. The stone rim has been worn smooth by countless hands over generations. With practiced ease, he lowers the bucket into the darkness, feeling the rope slide steadily through his palms until the faint sound of water echoes up from below. He lifts the bucket, now heavy and full, and carries it carefully to where Nansen waits beside a large wooden tub. Steam rises as the cool water meets the heat already there. When the bath reaches the proper temperature, Taisui steps back, ready to leave. But instead of entering the bath, Nansen watches him closely. Taisui lifts the bucket, still holding a small amount of unused water, and prepares to pour it casually onto the ground. Before the water can spill, a sharp command cuts through the stillness. "Stop." Taisui freezes, startled, the bucket suspended in midair. Confusion flickers across his face as he looks to his teacher. Nansen's voice is firm, not cruel, as he scolds him for his carelessness. Why waste even a single drop? Why not give it to the plants? What right does anyone have to squander water in this place? Color rises in Taisui's cheeks as he straightens the bucket. For a brief moment, you sense his impulse to explain himself. It is only a small amount of water, but something in Nansen's gaze halts him. The courtyard grows utterly silent, as if even the birds have paused to listen. In that stillness, a subtle shift occurs. You see it in Taisui's face, not mere embarrassment, but a sudden clarity. His eyes widen slightly. His posture changes, and understanding unfolds within him with surprising gentleness. Without a word, he turns and carries the remaining water to a small cluster of herbs growing nearby. He pours it carefully at their roots, ensuring not a single drop is lost. When he finishes, he bows deeply to Nansen, gratitude evident in every movement. He speaks softly, acknowledging that he understands. Nansen nods once, satisfaction passing briefly across his weathered features, and then steps into the bath as if nothing of importance has occurred. Yet you know that everything has changed. In that simple moment, in that nearly discarded drop of water, Taisui has touched something essential. You continue to observe him through the rest of the day, curious how this insight will reveal itself. Almost immediately, his movements carry a new quality. While helping prepare the midday meal, he treats each grain of rice as worthy of full attention. When washing bowls, he uses exactly the water required, neither more nor less. Even his footsteps seem more grounded, as though he now senses the weight of each action. Later, another young monk asks him why he has become so careful. Taisui smiles gently and replies that he has learned nothing is merely a drop of water. Within that drop, he says, exists the entire universe. How one treats the smallest thing reflects how one understands the greatest. Years pass. Taisui matures into a teacher himself, eventually taking a new name that means a drop of water. The lesson learned beside the bath becomes the heart of his teaching, a reminder that awakening often arrives not through dramatic revelation, but through intimacy with the ordinary. As your awareness slowly returns to your own life, you are invited to consider the unnoticed drops of water you encounter each day, the moments, resources, and gestures you may overlook or discard without thought. Perhaps it is a few quiet minutes before sleep, uneaten food, a brief interaction with a stranger, or the unconscious rhythm of your own breathing. The story gently suggests that mindfulness is not reserved for lofty experiences, but lives in the way attention is given to even the smallest acts. When water, food, time, where energy is wasted, it reveals not carelessness alone, but a deeper forgetting of how intimately everything is connected. Each drop comes from somewhere and moves on to somewhere else. Nothing stands alone. Nothing is without consequence. In this way, every action becomes practice. Washing your face, preparing a meal, cleaning a room, all contain the entirety of the path when met with awareness. As these reflections settle, you feel yourself drifting once more toward rest, your breath slow and even. Each inhalation and exhalation arrives like a precious drop of air, received and released without grasping. You notice how attention itself changes the quality of your presence. And in that noticing, a quiet understanding begins to form. Like Tesui, you sense that wisdom does not always wait at the end of great effort. Sometimes it appears in the most ordinary moment, revealed through a single drop of water. As your breath continues its slow, unforced rhythm, the boundary between waking awareness and dreamlike presence softens even further. The darkness behind your closed eyes becomes luminous, unfolding into another scene from long ago. You are walking along a winding mountain path in medieval Japan. Late afternoon light filtering through towering cedar trees, whose trunks rise like silent sentinels. The air is cool and carries the faint scent of earth and resin. The path leads you to a small hermitage perched above a valley filled with drifting mist. This is the dwelling of Baso Tokusho, a Zen master renowned for teachings that are direct, uncompromising, and deeply compassionate. Unlike those who remain within the safety of large temples, Baso chose a simple life, welcoming farmers, merchants, and warriors alike. His door, like his heart, is open to anyone sincerely seeking understanding. As you approach, you see Baso seated on a weathered wooden platform outside his modest hut. His body is lean, shaped by years of discipline, resembling a pine tree bent by wind, yet firmly rooted. Though he appears to be in the later years of his life, there is a timeless clarity in his presence. When his eyes meet yours, they are sharp and penetrating, yet softened by warmth. Nearby, several disciples move quietly through their tasks. Some prepare simple food, others copy sutras with careful hands, while a few tend the small garden that sustains the community. Their movements are unhurried, infused with a quiet dignity. Into this stillness arrives a messenger, bowing deeply as he presents a scroll to Baso. The message comes from a disciple named Iguchi, who has fallen gravely ill. Believing his death to be near, he asks for a final teaching to guide him as he stands at the threshold between life and whatever lies beyond. As Baso reads, you see compassion ripple gently across his face. He nods once, acknowledging the gravity of the request. A disciple brings paper, an inkstone, and a brush. Baso begins by grinding the ink, his attention complete and unwavering. Each circular motion is deliberate, as though this preparation itself carries meaning. When the ink reaches the right depth and texture, he lifts the brush. For a moment, he sits perfectly still, the tip hovering above the paper, breath and body aligned. Then he begins to write. His movements are fluid, confident, shaped by decades of practice. Though you cannot read the characters forming beneath the brush, you sense that these are not words meant to comfort in an ordinary way. There is a directness in his writing, an immediacy that seems to pass beyond language itself, as if he is speaking directly into the heart of his dying student. When he finishes, Baso gently dries the ink and rolls the scroll with care. Handing it to the messenger, he urges him to travel quickly, for time is short. The messenger bows and departs, leaving behind a lingering silence and a question that rests heavily in your mind. What final wisdom could be offered at such a moment? That evening, as the community gathers, Baso addresses his disciples. He tells them that he has written to someone standing very close to death, and that they too should listen carefully. For none of them, no matter how healthy they appear, can know when their final breath will come. He then shares the essence of the message. The true nature of the mind, he explains, is not something that is born, and therefore it cannot die. It is not an object that can decay, nor an empty void lacking substance. It has no color, no shape, no form that can be grasped. It does not chase pleasure or recoil from pain. Speaking gently, Baso acknowledges Iguchi's illness and praises him for facing it directly. He encourages him not to become lost in confusion about who or what is suffering, but instead to turn his attention inward and inquire deeply. What is the essence of this mind? He tells him to hold only this question, to desire nothing else. Your end, which has no end, he says, is like a snowflake dissolving into clear air. As these words settle into the space around you, a profound stillness fills the room. You feel their impact, not as an idea to be understood, but as a subtle shift in your own body, as though something long held tight has quietly loosened. There is no drama in this release, only a gentle easing. You sense how each of the stories you have witnessed points to the same quiet truth. In Hakuin's steady response to accusation and praise, there is freedom from clinging. In Teisui's awakening through a single drop of water, there is reverence for the ordinary. In Baso's final teaching, there is an invitation to rest in what cannot be harmed or lost. None of these moments rely on escape from life. They arise directly within it. They do not ask for special conditions, only clear seeing. You begin to understand that equanimity is not distance, mindfulness is not rigidity, and wisdom is not accumulation. Each is a way of meeting reality without distortion. As your awareness gently turns back toward your own life, you notice the quiet spaces between breaths. You notice sensations without naming them, thoughts without following them. There is nothing to achieve here, nothing to resolve. Just this moment, unfolding exactly as it is. You may sense questions forming, not as problems to solve, but as doorways. Where might you loosen your grip? Where might you offer the same care to small things? Where might you trust what remains when everything else falls away? There is no need to answer now. The teachings have already been received, not through effort, but through attention. Like seeds resting in the soil, they will unfold in their own time. As you drift further into rest, allow your breathing to continue its natural rhythm. Each inhale arrives, each exhale departs, complete in itself. Thoughts may rise and fade, like mist in the valley below, never disturbing the deeper stillness beneath. In this quiet, you are not becoming anything new. You are simply remembering what has always been present. And in that remembering, there is nothing lacking, nothing extra, nothing to hold on to. Only this. Even if the deepest meaning of Baso's words does not fully resolve itself in your mind, you can feel their quiet power. They seem capable of loosening fear, of opening what has long been clenched. Later, you learn what happened when the messenger finally reached Iguchi's bedside and read the letter aloud. Those who were present say the change was immediate. The lines of pain and worry on the dying man's face softened, giving way to a faint smile of recognition, as if something long forgotten had suddenly been remembered. Iguchi passed away that same night. His body was at ease, his breath gentle and unstrained until the very end. People spoke of how the room itself felt altered,
filled with a subtle radiance that lingered even after his final exhale. In the days that follow, as you remain near Baso's hermitage, you find your thoughts returning again and again to the words of that letter, turning them over quietly, not as ideas to analyze, but as something to feel into.
The essence of your mind is not born, so it will never die. You sense the depth of this statement without being able to pin it down. What is this essence that comes before birth and reaches beyond death? What is this awareness that cannot be called existence or emptiness, that has no form and yet is undeniably present? You begin to notice how ordinary thinking assumes a solid self that appears at birth, moves through time, collecting experiences and identities, and then disappears at death. From this assumption arise fear and grasping. We cling to roles, relationships, memories, possessions, all the while sensing that they are fragile. Baso points beyond this constructed self to something more fundamental, the clear awareness that witnesses every experience yet remains untouched by what it observes. This awareness has no beginning and no ending. It cannot be injured or improved. It does not suffer pain or chase pleasure, and yet it is not blank or lifeless.
It is luminous, knowing itself, aware of all forms while remaining formless. When Baso urged his dying student to ask about the essence of the mind, he was not encouraging philosophical speculation. He was pointing toward a direct turning back, awareness recognizing itself without mediation. This simple inquiry has the power to cut through the elaborate stories we tell about who we are and what death means.
Your end, which is endless, is like a snowflake dissolving into clear air. The image lingers with you. A snowflake does not vanish into nothingness when it melts.
It returns to the water from which it momentarily took shape. Its form dissolves,
but its essence remains. In the same way, individual consciousness, like a wave on the ocean, subsides back into the vast awareness from which it arose.
This teaching offers comfort without illusion. There are no promises of reward, no threats of punishment, no demand for belief. Instead, there is an invitation to look directly into your own experience. Think only of this. You will need no more. As you gradually return to your own present life,
you sense how this understanding could reshape your relationship with impermanence. Endings are everywhere, not only death, but the quiet endings that punctuate daily life. Relationships shift or fade. Work changes or concludes. Strength diminishes. Objects break. Memories blur. Each ending becomes another opportunity to ask the same essential question. What is it that knows this change?
Rather than turning away from impermanence,
you are invited to look directly into it and discover, within the flow of change itself, something that does not change. As this insight settles, your body relaxes further. Awareness seems to widen, boundaries softening. Once again, you are carried through time. Arriving in 18th century Japan, you walk along a narrow forest path, leaves rustling softly, birds calling from unseen branches. Ahead, a grand temple complex emerges among ancient cedars, its rooflines elegant against the sky. This is a renowned Shingon temple, a place of scholarship as much as devotion.
A bell resonates through the air as you enter a large hall where many have gathered. Seated on a raised platform is a monk in pristine robes.
This is Jun, a master known not only for spiritual insight, but for extraordinary learning.
Fluent in many languages, revered for his brilliance, he delivers a lecture that weaves complex strands of Buddhist philosophy into a seamless whole. The audience listens with rapt attention, drawn toward the clarity of his mind. When the lecture ends, Jun returns to his private quarters, a room surprisingly simple given his stature. As he settles among his texts, an attendant arrives with a letter.
Jun opens it carefully, and you notice his expression soften. The letter is from his mother, though he is now an accomplished teacher with many disciples. Something tender and childlike surfaces as he reads.
The letter begins with concern for his health and quiet pride in his achievements. Then it shifts. She writes plainly, without ornament. She does not believe he became devoted to the Buddha in order to turn himself into a walking dictionary. There is no end to knowledge, she says, no limit to praise and recognition. She urges him to leave the lecture halls, to withdraw to a small, remote temple, and to devote himself fully to meditation so that realization may deepen.
The words land with unexpected force. This is not criticism born of rivalry or ignorance, but clear seeing rooted in love. Jun reads the letter again and again, then sits silently for a long time. Over the following days, you notice a subtle change. He continues his duties, yet something new is present, a questioning that reaches beyond intellect.
Eventually, Jun gathers his senior students. He tells them that his mother has revealed what he himself had missed, that he has mistaken the finger pointing to the moon for the moon itself.
He announces that, after completing his obligations, he will withdraw to the mountains. Some may follow. Others may remain with scholarship. Both paths have value, he says, but his own must change.
True to his word, Jun leaves his prominent position and establishes a small community in a remote mountain temple. Life there is simple and austere. Meditation before dawn. Simple meals, work, silence. One evening, as the mountains glow with fading light, a young monk asks whether he misses his former life. Jun smiles gently. Knowledge without realization, he replies, is like studying a map without ever walking the land. The map has value, but now he walks the path itself. As night falls, you sense the quiet wisdom in his mother's words. It is possible to know everything about awakening without ever touching it. Teachings are only pointers. If we cling to them as identity, we miss what they indicate. As you drift deeper into rest,
another scene forms, carrying you onward into yet another story still waiting to unfold.
The next story does not announce itself. It arrives the way a memory surfaces during quiet breathing, without effort, without urgency. You find yourself standing beside a river at dawn. Mist drifts low over the water, blurring the line between what is reflected and what is real. A lone monk sits on a flat stone near the bank.
Robes gathered loosely around him, eyes half open, neither focused nor closed.
This is not a famous teacher. His name is rarely recorded. He lives simply, traveling from place to place, staying where food and shelter are offered, leaving when it is time. Those who meet him often forget his face, yet remember how they felt in his presence, as if something heavy had been set down without explanation. One morning,
a young fisherman approaches him. The man has been watching the monk for several days, intrigued by the stillness that seems to follow him like a quiet shadow.
The fisherman is not unhappy, yet something unsettles him. Each day feels unfinished, as though he is always arriving too late or leaving too early.
He asks the monk what practice he follows, what teaching allows him to sit so calmly beside the moving water.
The monk listens without interrupting. When the fisherman finishes, the monk gestures toward the river. He asks whether the fisherman has ever tried to grasp the reflection of the sky and the water. The fisherman laughs and shakes his head. Of course not. The reflection cannot be held. The monk nods. Yet you spend your life trying to hold reflections. He says gently, mistaking them for what they reflect.
The fisherman does not fully understand.
But something in the words resonates. He sits beside the monk in silence. They listen to the river together, the steady sound of water over stone, the calls of distant birds. Time stretches, then dissolves. When the fisherman finally rises to return to his nets, he bows instinctively. Though no instruction was given,
as you observe this quiet exchange, you notice how often understanding arrives not as a complete answer,
but as a subtle shift. Nothing dramatic occurs. No grand insight is proclaimed, yet something has been loosened. The fisherman will return to his life, but the river will never look quite the same. Scenes like this repeat themselves across generations, unnoticed by history. Awakening does not always wear the robes of importance. It often moves invisibly.
Like breath, like awareness itself, you begin to sense how teachings adapt themselves to the moment,
meeting each person where they stand, using whatever language is already familiar.
Once again, time bends. You are now inside a modest temple courtyard. A group of novices is sweeping fallen leaves. Their movements are uneven.
Some distracted, some overly earnest. An older nun watches from the veranda, her expression unreadable. After a while, she steps forward and asks one novice why he is sweeping.
The question catches him off guard. He answers that it is his assigned task, that sweeping keeps the temple clean, that it is part of his training. She listens, then asks him to stop. She takes the broom herself and sweeps one small section of the courtyard with full attention, each movement complete in itself. Then she hands the broom back without explanation. The novice feels embarrassed, unsure what he has done wrong. Yet as he resumes sweeping,
something changes. The movement feels different, less rushed, less concerned with finishing. The sound of leaves against stone becomes vivid.
His breathing settles. Later, he will not be able to explain what happened, only that sweeping no longer feels like a means to an end. You recognize this pattern. Again and again, the teaching points away from future attainment and back toward immediate presence. The ordinary becomes the doorway. There is no need to add anything, no need to remove anything. Attention itself is the transformation. As these impressions gather, you notice how the mind often resists simplicity. It seeks complexity, hierarchy, progress. It wants assurances that effort will be rewarded, that time invested will produce measurable results. Yet the wisdom threaded through these stories suggests something else entirely. What you are looking for is not distant. It is already functioning, already aware. The difficulty lies not in reaching it, but in ceasing to overlook it. Another image arises. A man walks along a road, carrying a heavy bundle on his back. He has been told that this bundle contains everything he needs. Over time, the weight bends his posture, slows his steps. He grows tired, resentful, yet afraid to set it down. One day, exhausted, he rests beneath a tree and loosens the straps. The bundle falls open. Inside, there is nothing.
At first, panic, then laughter. He realizes the burden was never in the bundle, but in the belief that he must carry it.
You feel how this story mirrors the way identity is carried. Roles, beliefs, memories, even spiritual ideas become weight when they are mistaken for who you are. When they fall away, what remains is not absence, but ease. As the rhythm of these stories continues, your breathing deepens naturally. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer demand engagement. They pass like clouds across an open sky. You are not asked to stop them, only to notice that they do not stay. The path described here is not dramatic. It does not promise constant bliss or unbroken clarity. It points instead to intimacy with whatever arises. Joy, sorrow, confusion, peace, all become expressions moving through the same open field of awareness. Nothing is excluded. Nothing needs to be fixed. In this openness, fear begins to soften, not because danger disappears, but because the one who fears is seen more clearly. The sense of a separate self, fragile and threatened, loosens its grip. What remains is responsiveness rather than reactivity, presence rather than avoidance. You sense that this understanding cannot be forced. It ripens in its own time, often when striving relaxes. Like a hand unclenching, like eyes adjusting to darkness, it happens gradually, then all at once. The stories fade, but the feeling they leave does not. There is a quiet confidence now, not in answers, but in direct experience. Whatever arises can be met. Whatever passes does not take awareness with it. As the inner landscape settles, you are aware once more of stillness beneath movement, silence beneath sound. The teaching has not added anything new. It has only pointed back to what has always been here, patiently waiting to be noticed. As the final movement of this teaching unfolds, nothing new is introduced. There is only a deepening of what has already been quietly present. You sense how the mind, when no longer chasing conclusions, naturally rests. Awareness does not tighten around experience. It allows life to pass through, moment by moment, without resistance. You notice how sound arises on its own, a distant echo, the subtle hum beneath silence. Each sound appears, lingers briefly, then fades without effort. No sound asks to be held. No silence tries to remain. In this simple observation, something becomes clear without being spoken. Experience is self-liberating. It completes itself. Thoughts follow the same pattern. A memory forms, shaped by the past. An image of the future flickers briefly. Each dissolves as easily as it appeared. The problem was never the thoughts themselves, but the habit of stepping into them, mistaking movement for identity. When this habit softens, thinking continues, yet it no longer obscures. You begin to sense the body from within, not as an object to manage, but as a field of sensation. Weight presses gently into the ground. Breath moves without instruction. There is warmth, coolness, subtle vibration. None of these require interpretation. They announce themselves, then quietly pass on. In this simplicity, a subtle trust emerges. Life does not need to be controlled in order to unfold. It is already happening with precision beyond personal effort. The heart beats. The lungs breathe. Seasons turn. Even confusion arises and resolves on its own when it is not fed with resistance. A memory surfaces of someone who once asked how long awakening takes. The question itself now feels slightly misplaced, as if asking how long it takes for the sky to notice the clouds passing through it. Time belongs to processes, not to awareness. Awareness is already here before the question is formed. This does not make life distant or indifferent. On the contrary, it brings intimacy. When the burden of becoming dissolves, what remains is contact. You feel sadness more clearly, without the added story of failure. You feel joy without grasping. Compassion arises not as a moral duty, but as a natural response to shared vulnerability. Even pain, when it appears, is met differently. Sensation is allowed to be sensation. The additional layer of this should not be happening loosens. In that loosening, pain is still pain, but suffering no longer multiplies. There is space around it, room to breathe.
You realize that much of what was once called practice was simply learning how to stop interfering, not withdrawing from life, but stepping out of the way of its natural intelligence.
The effort was never meant to perfect the self, but to see through the assumption that such a self must be perfected. In this seeing, gratitude arises quietly, not directed at anyone in particular. Gratitude without object, for the simple fact of being aware, for the ordinary miracle of presence.
Unnoticed for so long because it asked for nothing.
The stories that carried you here begin to dissolve, not because they were false, but because their work is done. They were never meant to be held on to. Like boats crossing a river, they brought you to the far shore, and then quietly slipped away. What remains is not an answer, but a way of being, listening without strain, seeing without labeling, responding without rehearsing. Life moves, and awareness moves with it, untouched, yet fully involved. There is no final instruction, no closing statement, only this gentle recognition, available in any moment you remember to notice. The mind may wander again. It always does. But now there is less urgency in returning, because nothing essential was ever lost. Rest here, not as an achievement, but as a natural pause, the kind that happens when effort releases itself. Breath continues, awareness remains, and in this quiet continuity, there is nothing more that needs to be added, nothing that needs to be taken away. Here, without ceremony, the telling comes to rest. Why not simply require everyone to bring cloth from the very beginning? The old man laughs softly at the question. That, he says, is exactly the brilliance of the strategy. By staging something so strange, so memorable as the arrest of a stone Buddha, the judge ensured that news would spread quickly through the village and beyond. Curiosity would do what authority alone could not. People would come not out of obligation, but out of fascination. If he had announced a simple order, the guilty person might have remained hidden, choosing absence over exposure. He pauses, lifting his cup of tea, letting the steam rise before continuing. By accusing the crowd of contempt, he explains, the judge created a reason to demand cloth that appeared unrelated to the theft. Another villager nods, adding that the judge understood more than law. He understood human nature. He knew how curiosity draws people in, how spectacle overrides caution, how laughter and disbelief loosen defenses. Even the tendency to mock something absurd became a tool in the service of truth. As you sit with this story, a deeper layer begins to reveal itself. The judge did not force the truth into the open. He created an environment where truth could no longer hide. Instead of threats, he used insight. Instead of confrontation, he used indirection. Like a seasoned Zen teacher, he knew that pushing directly against resistance only strengthens it, while a subtle shift in conditions allows what is hidden to surface on its own.
There is something profoundly Zen in this approach. The act of arresting a stone Buddha is absurd on its face. It defies logic, expectation, and decorum. Yet it is precisely this absurdity that clears the path. Zen teachings often work the same way. Koans confuse the rational mind not to frustrate it, but to exhaust its habitual patterns. When logic collapses, something deeper has room to appear. Equally important,
is the compassion woven into the judge's method. He avoided invasive searches and harsh interrogations that would have humiliated the innocent, along with the guilty. Instead, he inconvenienced everyone briefly, while ensuring that only the one carrying guilt would ultimately reveal himself. Even the thief was offered a path to confession that preserved a measure of dignity. Justice was served without cruelty, clarity without harm. As your awareness drifts toward rest, you begin to wonder where such wisdom might apply in your own life. Where does direct confrontation harden positions rather than resolve them? Where might a lighter touch, or even a playful one, open doors that seriousness keeps closed? How might truth be invited forward rather than dragged into the light? Like the stone Buddha, smiling quietly at the center of the spectacle, wisdom often hides behind what looks foolish at first glance. The path to truth is rarely straight. It bends and circles, guided by patience and a subtle understanding of the human heart. These qualities are not reserved for judges or sages. They exist within you as well, waiting for moments when force fails and insight is required. Feel your body growing heavier, the muscles softening as your mind sinks deeper into ease. The boundary between waking and dreaming begins to thin. Without effort, you find yourself in a small farming village long ago. The air smells of damp earth and wood smoke. Narrow paths wind between simple homes roofed with straw. Children crouch in the dirt, absorbed in play, while adults move through familiar routines shaped by necessity and repetition. Despite the village's poverty, a modest temple stands at its center. It is not grand, but it is cared for. Its wooden beams are worn smooth by time and touch. Through its open doors, you glimpse an altar, illuminated by the warm glow of butter lamps. A bronze Buddha rests there, its surface catching the light in quiet reflections. Villagers pause as they pass, bowing instinctively. Some step inside for a moment, offering a prayer before returning to their work. Among them, one man draws your attention. His face holds an intensity that sets him apart, while others carry the calm fatigue of hard lives. His expression suggests something more complex, a tension not easily named. He moves through the day with purpose, his eyes returning again and again to the temple. As evening approaches and the village settles into stillness, you watch him remove his sandals and enter the sacred space. He bows deeply and kneels before the statue, lighting incense. Smoke coils upward as he prays with unusual devotion, his forehead touching the floor again and again. When the temple empties and darkness gathers outside, the scene shifts. The man glances around, ensuring he is alone. From his sleeve, he produces a small container. Inside is black ink. Calmly, almost tenderly, he dips his finger and reaches toward the Buddha's face. With deliberate care, he paints the statue's nose black. There is no trace of malice in his movements. Instead, a strange blend of reverence and mischief flickers in his eyes. When he finishes, he bows once more and leaves, disappearing into the night as quietly as he arrived. By morning, the village is in turmoil. The defaced statue draws a crowd, voices buzzing with shock and fear. Who would dare violate something so sacred? What punishment might follow, the headman, concerned for the village's well-being, decides to keep watch that night. Hidden in shadow, he waits. Near midnight, the man returns, repeats his prayers, and once again paints the Buddha's nose after it has been cleaned. This time, the headman steps forward, his voice steady but firm. "Why are you doing this? Do you not fear the consequences?" The man turns, startled yet unafraid. After a pause, he speaks with sincerity.
He explains that this Buddha has watched over the village through every hardship.
He paints the nose black because he wants the statue to remain.
Nearby, he says, a wealthy town has spoken of taking the Buddha for their grand temple. But who would want a Buddha with a blackened nose?
By making it imperfect, in their eyes, he keeps it perfect for those who truly love it.
The headman listens in silence. What seemed like desecration reveals itself as devotion expressed in an unconventional form. After reflection, he nods. Intention matters more than appearance,
he says. Still, they agree to find another way. In the days that follow, the villagers hide the bronze statue and replace it with a wooden one. The original, marked by black ink, is brought out only for special occasions. Its imperfection becomes a symbol of their bond, a reminder that reverence is not always polished or proper. As this story settles, its meaning deepens. True devotion does not always look correct. Sometimes it challenges convention to protect what matters most, like the Zen teaching that shocks in order to awaken. The black-nosed Buddha reminds you that sincerity carries more weight than form, and that wisdom often wears unexpected faces. As the image of the altered statue lingers in your awareness, another layer of understanding begins to unfold. On the surface, the act seemed wrong, even offensive, yet beneath it lived a clarity untouched by rules or appearances. This paradox appears again and again in the Zen tradition, where what shocks the mind often softens the heart. True reverence, it seems, does not always bow in predictable ways. Sometimes it disguises itself as defiance, sometimes as humor, sometimes as an action that unsettles those who look only at form. There is an old Zen saying that warns,
if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Taken literally, it sounds blasphemous, yet its meaning points elsewhere entirely. It speaks to the danger of clinging to images,
ideas, or external symbols, and mistaking them for awakening itself. The villager with the black ink understood this intuitively. The statue mattered not because of its flawless surface or its value to collectors, but because it served as a living presence in the daily life of the community.
Its worth was relational, not ornamental. You begin to notice how often perfection becomes a barrier rather than a bridge, how easily ideals intimidate, discourage, or create distance.
The blackened nose was a refusal of that kind of perfection, an insistence that what is sacred must remain close, imperfect, and humanly held.
In making the statue less desirable to outsiders, the villager protected its true function.
He chose belonging over admiration, presence over prestige. As your breathing slows, this insight turns gently inward. Where in your own life might you be confusing outer correctness with inner sincerity? Perhaps you have delayed beginning a practice because conditions were not ideal. Perhaps you believed you needed more knowledge, more discipline,
more readiness before you could begin. Or perhaps you have judged your efforts as unworthy because they did not resemble some imagined standard of
spiritual success. The black-nosed Buddha offers a quiet reassurance. What matters is not the elegance of your posture, the purity of your thoughts, or the refinement of your understanding.
What matters is the honesty of your intention. A cracked bell that rings with a distinctive tone still calls people to awareness. Worn prayer beads still carry the devotion of countless hands. A simple altar, unremarkable to others,
may hold immense meaning for those who kneel before it each day. In this way, imperfection becomes a signature of authenticity. It tells a story of use, of presence, of life, lived in contact with what is real. As you rest with this realization, the sense of striving begins to loosen. The need to appear complete gives way to the freedom to simply be sincere.
Your body sinks further into comfort. Time feels less linear now, more like a wide river, carrying images and impressions without effort. Gradually, another scene forms around you. Warm air touches your skin. The scent of flowers and earth fills your breath. You find yourself on a gentle hillside beneath an open sky, the light of late afternoon spreading everything in gold.
This is an ancient place, alive with quiet anticipation. Hundreds of monks sit arranged in wide arcs, their simple robes catching the breeze. Faces are turned toward the center, alert yet calm. At the heart of the gathering sits the Buddha himself,
unmoving, radiant in his stillness. Around him are familiar figures, disciples whose devotion has taken different forms, some known for compassion, others for discipline or sharp intellect. There is a shared sense that something important is about to happen. The air seems to hold its breath. You take your place among the assembly, feeling the collective attention settle into silence. No one speaks. The quiet deepens, becoming dense, almost tangible, as if it were teaching on its own. Minutes pass. The silence stretches beyond expectation. You notice how the mind searches for meaning, for cues, for instruction. Then, without a word, the Buddha slowly raises his hand.
Between his fingers rests a single lotus flower, white and fresh, still carrying traces of dew. He does nothing else. He simply holds it up, offering no explanation.
A ripple of confusion moves through the gathering. Monks glance at one another, brows furrowed. Is this a symbol, a test, a mistake? The usual pathways of understanding find nothing to grasp. The mind, trained to analyze and interpret, begins to tire.
Then something subtle shifts. In the midst of the puzzled faces, one disciple smiles. It is a quiet, unremarkable smile, yet it carries recognition.
He sees what cannot be explained. The Buddha meets his gaze and returns the smile. Nothing more is said, yet something complete has been transmitted. This moment becomes known not for what was spoken, but for what was directly seen. The lotus was not a metaphor to decode, but an invitation to presence itself.
Form, revealing emptiness, emptiness expressing itself as form. Teaching without words, understanding without concepts. As you absorb this scene, you sense how it echoes the earlier stories. The letter that transformed fear into peace. The judge who revealed truth through absurdity.
The villager who protected devotion through apparent irreverence. Again and again, wisdom bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to awareness. You begin to feel how often the mind insists on explanations when what is needed is attention. How frequently meaning is chased rather than received. The Buddha's raised flower does not ask you to think, it asks you to see.
Resting in this seeing, boundaries soften. The effort to understand relaxes into simple presence. The stories do not demand belief, only openness. They point again and again to something already here, something that does not need improvement or defense.
As your body grows heavier and your breath more subtle, these images gently fade, not into darkness, but into a spacious quiet. The teachings do not conclude. They dissolve into you, leaving no sharp edges, only a sense of ease. What remains is not an answer, but a familiarity, a recognition that beneath stories of life and death, wisdom and error, perfection and flaw. There is an awareness that simply knows. And in this knowing, nothing is missing. The recognition that lingers after the flower is raised does not arrive as a thought. It arrives as a quiet settling, as if something long held in tension has finally been allowed to rest. Nothing new has been added. Nothing has been taken away.
The smile that passed between teacher and disciple carried no message that could be written down, yet it completed what words had always failed to finish. As the scene slowly dissolves, you sense how this wordless transmission echoes through all the stories you have encountered.
The letter read at a deathbed, the strange justice of an arrested statue, the blackened nose painted in secret, the lotus held in silence. Each moment points not toward belief, not toward doctrine, but toward a direct seeing that cannot be borrowed from another. It must arise within your own experience.
Or not at all.
You notice how often the mind reaches outward, seeking certainty in explanations,
Comfort in concepts, safety in conclusions. Yet every story gently undermines that habit. Again and again, understanding arrives when control loosens.
Peace appears when resistance softens. Truth reveals itself not through effort, but through a willingness to meet what is already here. The awareness that witnesses all of this remains unchanged. It was present in the fear of dying, in the curiosity of the crowd, in the devotion of the villager, in the confusion of the monks. It does not improve or degrade. It does not gain wisdom or lose it. It simply knows.
This is the essence that was never born and therefore cannot die. The essence that takes the shape of every moment without being confined by any of them.
As you rest in this recognition, the need to define yourself begins to fade. You are no longer required to be a seeker, a practitioner, a knower, or even a person moving along a path. Those roles may still appear, but they loosen their grip. What remains is a sense of being held by something vast and intimate at once, like the sky holding clouds without effort. Thoughts continue to arise, but they pass more freely now. Feelings come and go, but they no longer demand resolution. Even the idea of awakening feels less urgent, less like a destination and more like a gentle remembering. Nothing is missing, nothing essential has ever been absent. Your breath moves quietly in and out, unforced. The body feels warm, supported, at ease. Muscles soften in places you did not realize were tense. The mind, no longer tasked with solving anything, settles naturally. Silence returns, not as emptiness, but as fullness without form.
In this silence,
the teachings do not end. They simply stop speaking. Like a bell whose sound fades into the air, their resonance continues without vibration. You do not need to hold on to them. They have already done their work by pointing you back to what is always present. If questions arise, they no longer feel urgent. If doubts appear, they no longer feel threatening. They are seen as movements on the surface of something much deeper.
something untouched by fluctuation. Even fear, when it arises, is met differently now, not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a passing weather pattern within a much larger sky. You may notice a subtle gratitude emerging, not directed at any single figure or story, but at the simplicity of what is. Gratitude for the breath that continues on its own.
Gratitude for awareness that does not need instruction to be itself.
Gratitude for the mystery that remains open, unresolved, and therefore alive.
There is nothing more to attain in this moment. Nothing to complete, nothing to fix. The mind rests, not because it has found answers, but because it has stopped demanding them. The heart rests, not because life has become predictable, but because it no longer requires guarantees. As you drift closer to sleep, The boundary between inner and outer grows thin.
Sounds may come and go. Sensations shift gently. Yet beneath it all, the same awareness remains, steady and clear. It will be here when dreams arise. It will be here when dreams fade. It will be here in waking, just as it is here now. You are not asked to remember any of this. You are not asked to carry it forward as an idea. It is enough that it has been tasted, even briefly, like the lotus held aloft.
It requires no explanation. Its presence is complete in itself.
Rest now in this quiet knowing. Let the stories release you. Let the teachings dissolve back into silence. What remains does not belong to any tradition, any teacher, or any time. It is simply the ground of experience itself, open, luminous, and at peace.
And as sleep takes you, gently and without effort, this awareness does not go anywhere.
It does not follow you or leave you. It does not change states. It simply continues, just as it always has, just as it always will.
Throughout the silent gathering, only one presence responds differently from the rest. While confusion spreads softly among the monks, one elder seated near the front looks at the Buddha and the Buddha, raised flower, and a gentle smile appears on his face. It is not amusement, nor polite appreciation, but a smile born of deep recognition. As though something essential has been perfectly conveyed without a single word, the Buddha's gaze meets his, and the same quiet smile is reflected back.
At last, the silence is broken. The Buddha speaks of possessing the true eye of the teaching, the subtle mind of awakening, the form of what has no form, and a transmission that does not depend on words, texts, or explanations. This, he says, is entrusted to that one disciple. In that unassuming moment,
something decisive has occurred,
though few realize it. A wisdom beyond language has been passed directly, not through doctrine, but through shared seeing. As the assembly slowly disperses, questions ripple through the crowd. Some gather around the attendant known for his flawless memory of teachings, asking what the flower meant, why no explanation was given, and why one disciple alone was singled out. For once, there is no answer.
This event does not belong to the realm of memory or interpretation. It points beyond even the most refined structures of philosophy.
Later, you notice the smiling disciple seated quietly beneath a tree. A younger monk approaches, curiosity overcoming hesitation, and asks what was understood in that moment.
Instead of explaining, the elder gestures toward a bird singing nearby. They listen together to the simple sound cutting through the evening air. Then he asks whether the sound is heard. When the monk answers yes, the elder tells him that this is the answer. Confusion flickers, then frustration, and then something softer. Words fail, but a glimpse appears of something that cannot be explained.
This quiet exchange marks what later generations would see as the birth of a tradition centered on direct insight, while other paths refine systems of thought and commentary.
This way would emphasize immediate perception, understanding that arises before concepts form. The story refuses to explain itself, and that refusal is the teaching. If what was realized could be spoken, there would have been no need for silence. Perhaps what was seen was not a symbol, but completeness itself, not a flower representing truth, but truth expressing itself as this flower in this moment without separation. The smile that arose was not the satisfaction of solving a riddle, but the recognition of something always present, suddenly obvious. It is the same recognition that comes when confusion drops away, and ordinary reality reveals its quiet clarity. As your body relaxes further, the question turns gently toward your own life. Where might you be seeking understanding through accumulation of ideas rather than direct experience? Where might the simplest presence be overlooked while waiting for explanation? The flower is still being held up, moment after moment, inviting recognition rather than analysis.
Gradually, the scene fades, and another time forms around you. You find yourself in a period of rapid change, where old traditions and new influences collide. On the outskirts of an ancient city, a Zen temple stands quietly,
Its gardens carefully tended, its atmosphere steady amid transformation. A teacher lives here, known not for ambition, but for clarity and directness.
People from all walks of life seek him out, each receiving what is needed, often in unexpected ways.
On this day, unusual preparation fills the grounds. An official of high rank is expected. Attendants hurry, concerned with protocol and appearance. A calling card bearing an impressive title is presented to the teacher. He glances at it and calmly refuses the meeting, saying he has no business with such a figure. The attendants are shaken, fearing offense and consequence. When the official arrives and hears the message, he does not react with anger. Instead, he reflects, then crosses out his title from the card, leaving only his name. This is sent back. The teacher's face immediately softens. Now he is willing to meet.
The two sit together simply, speaking as equals, laughter occasionally drifting into the garden. When the official leaves, something has shifted. Authority remains, but it is lighter, less burdened. He bows not as a superior or subordinate, but as one human being to another. The teacher returns the gesture, inviting him to return without titles. This encounter reveals how deeply identity can obscure connection. Roles and names organize society, yet when clung to too tightly, they become barriers. By setting aside the title, even briefly, the official allowed a genuine meeting to occur. The teacher's refusal was not rejection, but an invitation to meet at a deeper level. You sense how many titles you carry as well, how they shape interactions and self-perception. They are useful, yet limiting. When crossed out, even for a moment, something more spacious appears. Beneath all labels lies a presence untouched by role or function. As the world softens again, you find yourself approaching a mountain monastery, where mist moves through pine trees and wood smoke drifts through the air. Here lives a teacher, known for speaking of the unborn nature of mind, expressing deep truths in simple language. Monks of all backgrounds gather here, some seasoned, some new. In the kitchen, the day's first meal is being prepared. Steam rises, bowls are washed, vegetables cut. This work is treated as practice, each movement an expression of awareness. Overseeing it all is the head cook, entrusted with nourishing the entire community, embodying care through the simplest actions. Throughout the monastery, the role of the tenzo carries a weight that goes far beyond cooking. Dio moves quietly among the monks, his sleeves rolled neatly, his attention resting fully on each simple action. He inspects the rice with the same care a scholar might give to sacred texts, washing the grains slowly, as if greeting each one. Nothing here is rushed, yet nothing is delayed. His presence sets the rhythm for the kitchen. And without a word, the younger monks begin to mirror his calm precision. You notice how Dio treats even the humblest ingredients with respect. A bruised radish is trimmed carefully, not discarded in frustration. Wilted greens are revived in cool water, handled as if they still have something important to offer. In this place, there is no sharp division between the sacred and the ordinary. Cooking rice and awakening the mind are not separate activities. They are expressions of the same attention. As the morning progresses, a minor problem arises. The rice supply delivered the previous evening is smaller than expected. There may not be enough to feed everyone fully. A murmur of concern passes through the kitchen. One monk suggests reducing portions. Another proposes sending someone to the nearby village. Dio listens without interruption, his hands still moving steadily. After a moment, he quietly adjusts the plan, adding barley and root vegetables, stretching the meal without diminishing its nourishment. There is no anxiety in his movements, only a practical intelligence, guided by care for the community. Later that day, you hear that Master Benki himself will visit the kitchen. Though he is known for his gentle manner, his presence still causes a ripple of nervousness. When he enters, the room seems to settle even further, as if the air recognizes him. He observes without comment, watching how the monks chop, stir, and carry water. His gaze eventually rests on Dio, who bows lightly but does not stop working. Benki approaches the steaming pot and asks, "What are you doing?" The question is simple, almost childlike. Dio replies, without hesitation, "Preparing food for the Sangha." Benki nods, then asks again, "And what is your mind?" While doing this, Dio pauses just long enough to meet Benki's eyes. "Rice is cooking," he says. "Hands are moving. That is all." A soft smile spreads across Benki's face. He does not praise or correct. He simply turns and leaves the kitchen, saying nothing more. The monks exhale collectively, unsure of what has just occurred. Yet something subtle has shifted. Dio's answer lingers in the room, not as a lesson to be analyzed, but as a quiet mirror. That evening, as the monks gather for the meal, there is a palpable sense of gratitude. The food is simple, yet deeply satisfying. Each bite seems to arrive exactly as it is, without embellishment or lack. As you eat, you realize that the nourishment comes not only from the ingredients, but from the quality of mind with which they were prepared. The kitchen, it seems, has extended itself into every bowl. Later, you find yourself walking through the monastery grounds at dusk. The mountains are wrapped in mist, and the sound of a distant bell fades into the evening air. You reflect on how these stories, though separated by centuries, point again and again to the same quiet truth. Whether it is a flower held aloft, a calling card with a title crossed out, or a pot of rice simmering over a fire, the teaching does not announce itself loudly. It waits in plain sight. Zen does not ask you to become someone else or acquire something exotic. It invites you to notice what is already present before names and explanations arise. The unborn Buddha mind that Bankei speaks of is not hidden behind effort or achievement. It is the awareness that is listening now, the simplicity that remains when striving relaxes its grip. As your body grows heavier and your breathing deepens, these images begin to soften. The kitchen fades, the monks dissolve into shadow, and only a sense of quiet presence remains. There is no need to hold on to the stories or extract conclusions from them. Like the bird's song Mahakashyapa pointed to, they have already done their work. Thoughts may still appear, drifting like clouds across a wide sky, but you no longer feel compelled to follow them. Each breath arrives and departs on its own. In this gentle rhythm, you rest as the awareness that has been present through every scene, unchanged by time or place. There is nothing you need to understand before sleeping, nothing you must resolve. The flower is still being held up, the rice is still cooking. Your original face, before all titles and efforts, remains quietly awake, even as the body sinks into rest. And in that simplicity, a faint, effortless smile may arise, not because something has been achieved, but because nothing more is required. As the night deepens, awareness drifts without effort, and another scene begins to form, not as a sharp image, but as a gentle unfolding. You find yourself in a small rural village, far from temples and formal practice halls. The houses are simple, built of wood and earth, their edges softened by time. A narrow path winds between them, lit by lanterns that sway slightly in the evening breeze. Here, Zen is not spoken of in formal language, yet it quietly permeates ordinary life. An elderly woman sits outside her home, repairing a torn garment by lamplight. Her hands move slowly but with certainty, each stitch placed without hesitation. A child nearby watches her, occasionally asking questions about the world that spill out without order or logic. The woman answers some and lets others pass in silence. Neither approach seems deliberate. It is simply what the moment calls for. You sense that she is not teaching, yet something is being conveyed more clearly than any explanation. A traveler passes through the village and pauses to ask for water. The woman rises, pours a cup, and hands it to him with both hands. For a brief moment, their eyes meet. There is no story exchanged, no background given, yet something complete happens in that simple offering. The traveler bows and continues on his way, carrying more than water, though he may not be able to say what it is. This, too, is Zen, not confined to monasteries or lineages, but alive wherever attention meets life directly. The stories of masters and monks are not meant to elevate the past or create distance. They point back to this immediacy, this unremarkable miracle of being present without adornment. As you rest with this understanding, you may notice how often the mind tries to move ahead, to grasp meaning, to turn experience into something solid. Yet each time it does, reality quietly slips through its fingers, remaining exactly where it has always been. Zen does not oppose thinking, but it gently reminds you that thinking is not the center. It is a tool, useful at times, but incapable of touching the heart of what is. The unborn mind that Benkai spoke of is not something mystical or remote. It is the awareness that hears these words without effort, the space in which sensations, thoughts, and emotions come and go. It has never been confused. Even when confusion appears, it has never been disturbed. Even when disturbance arises, recognizing this does not require concentration or insight. It requires only a soft willingness to stop interfering. Perhaps you notice now how the body knows how to sleep without instruction. Breath slows, muscles release, and the nervous system settles into its own intelligence. You are not doing this. It is happening naturally, just as the flower blooms and the bird sings. The mind may want to stay involved, to comment or evaluate, but even that can be allowed. Nothing needs to be pushed away. In the silence between breaths, there is a feeling of being held by something vast and intimate at the same time, not a presence separate from you, but the very ground of your experience. Zen points to this again and again, not as an object to contemplate, but as the subject you have never stopped being. The old stories continue to echo softly, not as teachings to remember, but as gentle nudges toward simplicity. Mahakashsapa's smile was not special because it belonged to him. It was special because it revealed something universal. The governor crossing out his title did not become less himself. He became more available to who he already was. The Tenzo cooking rice did not turn work into meditation. He revealed that work had never been separate from awareness. Now, as sleep approaches, you may feel yourself hovering at the edge of dreaming, where forms dissolve and boundaries blur. Zen has nothing to add here. It does not follow you into dreams, nor does it remain behind when you wake. It is present as dreaming, as waking, as the deep stillness of dreamless sleep.
If thoughts arise about understanding, let them drift. If images appear, let them pass. There is no need to hold on to any of it, like the lanterns in the village.
These experiences light the path only for a moment, then fade, leaving no trace. What remains does not need illumination.
You are invited to rest, not as someone who is trying to arrive somewhere,
but as what is never left. In this resting, effort naturally dissolves. Even the sense of being a listener may soften, giving way to a quiet openness without center or edge.
And perhaps, somewhere in this gentle descent into sleep, a recognition stirs, not dramatic, not defined, but simple and intimate. The recognition that what you have been seeking through stories,
practices, and understanding has been quietly present all along.
Not hidden, not withheld, but overlooked in the rush to grasp. There is nothing more to say about this. Words fall away on their own, like leaves returning to the ground. The night holds you without condition.
Breath flows, awareness remains, and the world continues its quiet turning.
Rest here, beyond explanation, beyond effort. The flower is still being held up, even now, and without needing to respond, without needing to smile or not smile, you are already answering.
Dio carries his role with quiet seriousness, moving through the kitchen with steady precision as the morning meal nears completion. Each dish is checked carefully before it leaves his hands.
One pot draws particular attention. The miso soup, simple yet essential, its aroma rising gently with the steam. He leans closer, examining its freshness with care, born not of anxiety, but of responsibility. By long-standing custom,
the abbot's meal is prepared separately. This is not a matter of privilege, but of support, an acknowledgement that the teacher's body must be sustained so the teaching itself can continue.
As he does every morning, Dio personally arranges the tray, placing the bowl of miso alongside the other simple dishes, then entrusts it to a young monk to deliver.
Soon after, the rest of the community gathers for their meal. They eat in silence, bowls aligned, movements measured, each mouthful received with awareness. Gratitude is offered, not as formality, but as recognition of the countless conditions that have made
this nourishment possible. Later that morning, something unexpected unfolds. Outside the kitchen, the abbot himself appears, carrying his tray. His presence alone draws attention. When Dio steps forward, the abbot lifts the bowl and tilts it slightly.
At the bottom rests a small dead lizard. A ripple of unease passes through the watching novices. Such an oversight is grave. In a strict monastery, the consequences could be severe.
Dio looks into the bowl, then bows deeply. There is no hesitation, no attempt to explain. His apology is simple and sincere. Then, before anyone can anticipate what will follow, he takes the bowl, removes the lizard, and eats it.
He drinks the remaining soup without pause.
A collective intake of breath moves through the onlookers. The act cuts across cultural boundaries of purity and impurity, food and defilement. It feels shocking, incomprehensible. The abbot watches without expression, neither approving nor condemning. After a long moment, he nods once and turns away.
Returning to his quarters, nothing more is said.
The incident is not mentioned again, yet among the novices it lingers. They gather later, whispering their interpretations. Perhaps Dio acted out of fear. Perhaps he was demonstrating extreme austerity. Perhaps he was hiding his mistake. An older monk, having overheard, steps closer. "You are all missing what happened," he says quietly. "That was responsibility." He explains that true responsibility leaves no residue. It does not justify itself. It does not defend. Dio did not merely admit his error. He consumed it entirely. There was nothing left to discuss. Words alone, the elder continues, are easily spoken. An apology can still carry excuses within it. Dio's action resolved the matter completely, leaving no space for blame or punishment. That is why the abbot said nothing more. When responsibility is fully taken, the matter ends.
This story reveals a radically different relationship to error. Usually, mistakes entangle us in narratives, denial, explanation, self-criticism, fear of judgment. We carry them long after they occur. Here,
the mistake is met directly, without drama. It is acknowledged, absorbed, finished. In that completeness, there is freedom, no lingering shame, no defensive posture. The abbot's silence affirms this freedom, allowing the moment to close fully. Nothing is kept alive unnecessarily. As the day fades, awareness softens again, and another scene emerges. You find yourself walking a forest path during a time of great change, when old traditions and new influences meet uneasily. Ahead, a Zen temple rests among the trees, its simplicity reflecting a teaching that needs no ornament.
this is the place of a master known for his clarity and restraint. His way is neither harsh nor indulgent, but exact. A young monk named Tenno has come here after many years of training elsewhere.
Though skilled and disciplined, he senses something unfinished. Tenno's days are orderly and sincere. He meditates diligently, works attentively, studies carefully. By all outward measures, he is exemplary.
Yet during his private meetings with the master, a single question arises again and again.
How is your practice when you are asleep? Tenno has no answer. He can only speak of his waking efforts. Each time, the master gently closes the meeting. Your practice is not complete.
Months pass. Tenno responds by trying harder. He extends his meditation, reduces his rest, sharpens his discipline. Yet the question remains unchanged.
Slowly, strain shows on his face. Effort has replaced ease.
Then, without announcement, something shifts. Tenno stops pushing. He continues his duties, but without forcing.
He walks in the forest. He rests when tired. He allows himself to sleep fully. When he next meets the master, his posture is relaxed, his presence clear. The question comes again. How is your practice when you sleep? This time, Tenno smiles. When I sleep, I just sleep. The master smiles in return. Practice has begun to mature. Sitting is just sitting. Walking is just walking. Sleeping is just sleeping. From then on,
training is no longer confined to formal periods. Every activity becomes complete in itself. There is no division between practice and life. Years later, Tenno will explain that the turning point came when striving fell away. Practice was never about adding something special. It was about removing what interfered.
Complete presence does not require effort. It reveals itself when effort releases. In this, there is nothing extra, nothing lacking, just this moment, fully lived. As this understanding settles, the story widens beyond the walls of the monastery and begins to touch something more intimate. The lesson Tenno received was not meant to remain within Zen halls or historical anecdotes, it points directly to the way life is already unfolding, moment by moment, without waiting for improvement or refinement. Most people live as if awareness must be switched on during special moments.
Meditation time, prayer time, study time. The rest of life is treated as preparation or distraction. In this way, practice becomes fragmented,
divided into sacred and ordinary, mindful and mindless. Yet, the question Nanan kept returning to gently dissolves that division. If awareness disappears when effort relaxes,
then it was never awareness to begin with. It was only tension, wearing spiritual clothing.
Sleep exposes this. Clearly, you cannot force sleep, and you cannot monitor it while it happens. The moment you try to manage it, it recedes. Sleep arrives only when control loosens. In the same way, presence reveals itself when the urge to supervise experience fades. This is why Nanan did not offer techniques or instructions.
Any method would have reinforced the misunderstanding.
Tenno's exhaustion was not a failure of discipline, but a misunderstanding of direction. He was walking faster on the wrong path. Only when he stopped trying to practice did practice reveal itself. Not as an activity, but as the natural state of being undivided.
This is what is meant by every minute Zen. Not continuous effort, but continuous intimacy with what is. When you eat, there is only eating. Taste, texture, movement. No observer standing apart. No commentary running alongside. When you walk, there is only walking. The ground meets the foot. Balance shifts. The body knows how to move without instruction. Even thinking, when it arises, can be just thinking. A thought appears, moves, dissolves. It does not require ownership. It does not need to be followed or corrected.
In this way, thinking loses its power to dominate. It becomes one movement among many,
not the ruler of experience.
This does not mean life becomes passive or vague. On the contrary, actions become more precise. When attention is no longer split, responses are immediate and appropriate. Just as Dio responded to his mistake without hesitation or defense, action arises from clarity rather than fear. There is no delay created by inner argument.
Responsibility, in this light, is no longer heavy. It is simply responsiveness. Something happens. You meet it fully. The moment completes itself. There is no residue to carry forward. Many people fear this simplicity. They believe that without constant self-monitoring, something will go wrong. Yet, it is often the monitoring itself that creates friction.
When awareness is trusted, life regulates itself with surprising intelligence. The body rests when tired. Words arise when needed. Silence arrives when words would only interfere.
Consider how often effort appears after the fact. A mistake happens, then the mind rushes in to explain, justify, or replay. Zen does not deny mistakes. It denies the necessity of prolonging them through narrative. What is done is done. What remains is the next moment.
This is why the abbot's silence after Dio's action was not indifference.
It was respect. To speak further would have reopened what was already closed. Silence honored completion.
In daily life, this same principle applies quietly. When something is finished, let it be finished. Do not keep reopening doors that have already closed.
Do not rehearse apologies that have already been embodied. Do not punish yourself repeatedly for what has already been acknowledged. Presence does not mean perfection. It means honesty without excess, directness without cruelty, simplicity without withdrawal. As you rest with these stories, you may notice how the mind still wants to collect them arrange them into lessons, turn them into something to remember. That impulse can also be seen without judgment. It is simply another movement. Let it pass. The essence of these teachings is not contained in the stories themselves. The stories function like fingers pointing. They are not meant to be held, but to redirect attention back to what is already here. Right now, there is sound. Perhaps distant, perhaps close. There is sensation in the body. Pressure, warmth, the subtle rhythm of breath.
None of this requires effort. It is happening without instruction. This is the field of practice Nanin pointed to. Not an achievement, but a recognition.
Even drifting, even losing focus, even falling asleep are not outside of this. When sleep comes, just sleep. Let awareness fold into rest without supervision. Nothing essential is lost. Awareness does not need to stay awake to exist.
This is deeply counter to how many people approach inner work. We are trained to improve, refine, optimize. Zen moves in the opposite direction.
It removes what is unnecessary until only the obvious remains. The obvious is often overlooked because it is too close. Like the flower held up in silence, it does not announce itself. It waits patiently for recognition, not understanding. You may sense now how all these stories are variations of the same pointing, the smile without explanation. The title crossed out, the mistake eaten completely, the sleep that is just sleep. Each reveals the same simplicity from a different angle. Nothing mystical is being added. Nothing ordinary is being removed. Only the habit of standing apart from life is gently questioned. As the body grows heavier and the mind softer, you are invited to rest in this unguarded simplicity, not holding awareness, not losing it, simply allowing what is happening to happen fully. There is no final insight to reach, no concluding statement that seals the teaching. Zen does not end in certainty. It ends in intimacy.
Breath flows. Sensation shifts. Thoughts come and go. And somewhere, within this ordinary unfolding, practice is complete without being practiced.
Remain here or drift into sleep. Either way, nothing is out of place. Nothing needs correction. This moment is already doing itself perfectly. The quiet that follows does not feel empty. It feels full in a way that cannot be measured. Like a room that has been carefully cleared of clutter, so its original shape can finally be felt. In this space, nothing asks to be improved. Nothing waits for permission to exist. Experience unfolds without commentary, and in that unfolding, something deeply familiar reveals itself. This familiarity is often mistaken for boredom. The mind, accustomed to stimulation and problem solving, searches for something to grasp. When it finds nothing new to collect, it assumes nothing is happening. Yet this assumption is itself another thought, another movement passing through. Beneath it, life continues effortlessly. Zen does not attempt to replace thinking with silence. It simply refuses to grant thinking exclusive authority. Thoughts arise like sounds or sensations. They come and go on their own, when they are no longer treated as commands or definitions. They lose their weight, they become light, almost transparent. This is why Zen stories rarely resolve in the way ordinary narratives do. They do not conclude with answers. They dissolve questions. The flower is held up, and the moment remains open. The master smiles, and the meaning is not captured. The teaching lives in what cannot be pinned down. In everyday life, this openness can feel unsettling at first. We are trained to secure certainty, to name and define our experiences so they feel manageable. Zen gently undermines this habit, not to create confusion,
but to restore trust in direct knowing. Before labels appear, there is already understanding. Before judgment arises, there is already contact.
When you touch a warm cup, you do not need a concept to know warmth. When a sound startles you, the body responds before the mind interprets. This immediacy is not primitive. It is intelligent in a way that predates thought. The problem is not thinking itself, but the assumption that thinking must oversee everything. Once this assumption loosens, thought can return to its proper place as a useful tool rather than a constant narrator.
Zen training, in this sense, is a long unlearning. Not the erasure of skills or knowledge, but the release of unnecessary tension around them.
Titles are crossed out. Effort is softened. Responsibility is taken fully, then set down. Even spiritual identity is included in what must be let go. The desire to be a good practitioner, a mindful person, an awakened one, can quietly become another role to defend.
Zen sees this and smiles gently. It does not argue. It simply removes the mirror in which the image was being maintained. But what remains is not emptiness in the nihilistic sense,
but availability, a readiness to meet whatever appears without preconception. This is why Zen often feels alive, even playful. When nothing needs to be protected, curiosity returns naturally. Children live close to this state before being trained out of it. They move fully into each activity, then leave it behind without residue. They cry completely, laugh completely, rest completely. Zen does not idealize childhood, but it recognizes this unfragmented way of meeting experience. As adults, fragmentation becomes normal. Part of the mind is always elsewhere, reviewing the past or rehearsing the future. Zen practice gently invites these parts to return home.
Not by force, but by showing that nothing is missing here.
Home, in this context, is not a place or belief. It is the simple fact of being present without division.
When this is recognized, even briefly, it carries a quiet authority, not the authority of doctrine, but of recognition. Like seeing an old friend, after many years, and knowing immediately,
without explanation.
This recognition does not need to be maintained. Attempts to hold on to it turn it into an object, something remembered rather than lived.
Zen allows it to come and go, trusting that what is real does not disappear simply because attention shifts. This trust is subtle. It develops not through reassurance, but through repeated direct experience. Each time, effort relaxes and presence remains. Confidence grows naturally. Not confidence in oneself as an achiever, but confidence in life's capacity to function without constant supervision. Gradually, even difficulty is met differently. Pain still hurts. Loss still aches. Confusion still arises. Zen does not promise immunity from these experiences. What changes is the absence of resistance layered on top. Suffering becomes cleaner, less tangled with stories about how it should not be happening.
In this way, compassion deepens, not as a moral obligation, but as a natural response. When you no longer need to defend an identity, you can meet others without armor.
Their pain is not separate from yours. Their joy does not threaten you. This is why Zen masters often appear ordinary, even unimpressive. They do not perform wisdom, they live without pretense. Their words are simple because they are not trying to convince. They are pointing back to what is already present. The stories you have encountered are not instructions to imitate dramatic acts. They are mirrors. Eating the lizard is not a recommendation.
Crossing out titles is not a ritual. Sleeping while sleeping is not a technique. Each points to the same underlying clarity, expressed in different circumstances.
Your life will not look like these stories, but the principle remains the same. When a moment arises, meet it fully. When it ends, let it end. Do not drag it forward through explanation or regret. This is not indifference. It is intimacy without clinging, care without control. As the mind quiets further, you may notice a softening around the edges of experience.
Time feels less rigid. Thoughts slow or become less compelling. The body rests more deeply into its own intelligence.
There is no need to analyze this state. Analysis reintroduces distance. Simply notice what is present without naming it. Sensation. Stillness. The subtle movement of breath. If thoughts arise saying this is good or not enough, see them gently and let them pass. They do not require response. They are habits completing themselves. Zen does not aim to create a permanent condition. It invites repeated returning, again and again, to what is simple and unadorned. Over time, returning becomes less deliberate. Presence begins to recognize itself.
Eventually, the distinction between practice and life dissolves. There is no moment outside of practice, because there is no moment outside of experience.
Even distraction becomes part of the field, not an enemy. This is the quiet revolution Zen offers. No dogma to adopt, no belief to defend, only the invitation to stop standing apart from what is already happening. Rest here as long as needed, or drift beyond words into sleep. Both are expressions of the same completeness. Nothing is waiting for you on the other side of this moment. There is only this unfolding exactly as it is, sufficient without adjustment. His turning point did not arrive through greater strain or stricter discipline, but through a gentle easing into the simple truth of each moment as it unfolded.
This was not a rejection of formal periods of practice, which still offered structure and grounding, but a clear seeing of their real function. They were not meant to stand apart from ordinary life as sacred islands of effort, but to refine a quality of awareness capable of flowing through every situation without interruption. As sleep begins to draw you inward, you might quietly reflect on how practice lives within your own days. Perhaps you have separated certain hours as spiritual, while the rest of life feels unrelated or untouched. Perhaps meditation exists in one compartment, while work, rest, and distraction occupy another. There is a possibility of a Zen that breathes through every minute, embracing both activity and stillness,
clarity and fatigue, intention and surrender. As you move toward rest tonight, you may wish to experiment with this insight. Rather than attempting to remain alert during sleep, which subtly divides watcher and experience, simply allow yourself to become sleep itself.
No effort is required, no method to uphold, no stance to maintain. There is only the complete acceptance of what is already happening. This is not a failure of practice, but its quiet completion. When all striving falls away, even the effort to be mindful, what remains is the natural, lucid awareness that was never absent.
As you drift deeper, let this simple wisdom accompany you. When sleeping, just sleep. Feel the body grow heavier, the breath slow and soften. Each exhale releasing what no longer needs to be carried. The concerns of the day loosen their grip and gradually dissolve, and your inner landscape begins to shift. In this soft transition, the familiar outlines of your room fade, replaced by another time and place. You find yourself in an earlier Japan, approaching a small temple tucked among pine-covered hills. It is not renowned for size or prestige, but for the quiet clarity of its aged teacher. Though his name has not survived in written records, his influence continues through stories preserved by those who studied under him. The temple grounds are modest and carefully tended. Stone paths are swept clean, gardens shaped with attention rather than display, buildings simple yet well kept. Everything reflects the master's way of teaching, direct, practical, free from ornament, rooted in the realities of daily life.
As you near the main hall, you notice an unusual arrival. A wealthy merchant has come, accompanied by servants bearing ornate gifts. Fine horses are secured nearby, and the visitor himself wears silk garments that announce both prosperity and status. Such a presence is rare here, as the temple usually welcomes farmers, craftspeople, and wandering monks.
The merchant appears confident and composed, accustomed to influence and recognition. Yet beneath this outward assurance lies a faint tension.
Visible in his eyes and the subtle set of his brow, he has come seeking something his success has not delivered. From a respectful distance,
you observe as attendants lead him to the teacher's quarters. The old master receives him without ceremony, seated on a worn cushion in a sparsely furnished room.
A single scroll and a small flower in a vase are the only adornments. The contrast between wealth and simplicity is unmistakable.
After tea is served, the merchant explains his reason for coming. He speaks of thriving enterprises, warehouses filled,
ships traveling far, a household lacking no comfort. Then his voice shifts. Despite all this, he admits, there is no lasting contentment. A persistent hollowness remains, untouched by acquisition.
The master listens quietly, showing neither surprise nor judgment. When the merchant finishes, he asks one question: "What are you seeking?"
After reflection, the merchant answers that he desires peace of mind and a way to use his resources that brings true fulfillment rather than accumulation.
The master nods and asks another question, seemingly unrelated. "How do you decide what is a fair price in your trade?" The merchant explains his calculations costs. Labor, rarity, demand. Higher prices for rare goods, modest profit for common ones. This is standard practice, he says.
And when you give to others, the master asks,
"How do you decide how much?" The merchant hesitates. He gives according to his position, larger sums for public causes, smaller ones elsewhere. Then the master asks quietly, "How do you determine the value of a human life?" The merchant is confused. "Such a thing cannot be measured," he replies.
"Yet you measure it constantly," the master says. "In wages you pay, in generosity you withhold or extend, in whether you turn away from someone in need.
Each choice assigns value, including to your own life." Silence follows. Finally, the merchant asks how he should decide what portion of his wealth to share. Instead of answering, the master leads him outside to a small pond. Lilies float on the surface. Koi moves slowly beneath. The master hands him a smooth stone and asks him to drop it in.
As the stone breaks the surface, ripples spread outward, touching every edge of the pond.
The master gestures toward them. The right proportion is this: when your actions honor the interconnection of all life, peace follows naturally. When you see that your well-being cannot be separated from that of others, generosity ceases to be calculation. It becomes clear that wealth is not defined by what is kept, but by the beneficial effects that extend beyond oneself. The merchant watches the ripples fade. the water returning to stillness. Something softens within him, a tension easing that had long gone unnoticed. Without further words, they return to the temple. Before leaving, the merchant arranges a substantial offering. More importantly, he begins a conversation about reshaping his business fair wages, reasonable prices, and ongoing support for the communities his trade touches. This is not charity as performance, but a restructuring rooted in understanding interdependence. In time, his enterprises become known not only for success, but for the well-being they generate. The emptiness that once drove him fades, replaced by purpose and connection. What he sought through accumulation is found through relationship. This story points to a deeper truth about fulfillment. We exist within a web of mutual influence, though we often imagine ourselves separate.
Like ripples in water, our actions extend further than we intend. When generosity is framed as transaction, it reinforces separation. When it arises from recognition of shared life,
it carries ease and joy. This understanding applies not only to money, but to time, attention, care, and presence. When these are offered freely, without obligation or expectation, they nourish both giver and receiver. The merchant's transformation reflects an ancient insight. Lasting satisfaction emerges not from feeding endless desire, but from loosening the boundaries of self. As rest deepens, consider the ripples your own life sends outward. Where might giving be measured rather than felt? How might your relationship with resources change if seen through connection instead of division? Perhaps the true proportion is not numerical, but a way of being that honors the inseparability of all lives. Your body relaxes further, heavy and supported, the mind light and spacious. Waking and dreaming begin to merge. You find yourself traveling again through time toward another mountain temple. Known for disciplined training and a teacher of profound clarity, ancient cedars surround it, incense drifts through the air, and stone lanterns line the path. This temple values sincere practice over display. As you approach, another visitor arrives, a scholar of great reputation, accompanied by attendants carrying texts. Known for intellectual mastery, he has come to challenge the Zen master, confident in philosophy and debate, curious to test the claim of wisdom beyond words. The scholar is guided into the teacher's quarters, his posture upright, his expression composed with the assurance of someone long accustomed to intellectual dominance.
You follow quietly, sensing the tension between two very different approaches to understanding.
The room is spare, almost austere. The master, an elderly monk with a weathered face and eyes clear as mountain water, gestures for the visitor to sit across from him on a plain cushion. The scholar begins without delay. He speaks of years spent immersed in sutras and commentaries, of debates held with respected teachers from many traditions. Zen, he says, troubles him. Its insistence on a transmission beyond words seems logically inconsistent. If truth cannot be expressed through language, how can it be conveyed at all? And if words are insufficient, why have Zen teachers themselves left behind so many written teachings? The master listens without interruption, his attention steady, his expression unchanged. When the scholar pauses, expecting engagement, the master asks only one thing.
Would you like some tea? The question lands strangely after such careful argument.
Slightly unsettled, the scholar agrees. The master rises and prepares the tea with unhurried movements. Each action is simple and complete. Water is poured, cups are set, steam curls softly into the air. As this unfolds, the scholar resumes his critique, elaborating on perceived contradictions among Zen lineages, questioning the emphasis on meditation over analysis, challenging the idea that sudden insight could replace systematic study, the master places a cup before him and returns to his seat. He says nothing. Encouraged by the silence, the scholar continues, moving through complex questions of Buddha, nature, duality, and the paradox of striving for enlightenment. His reasoning is sharp, his references precise. He builds argument upon argument, waiting for resistance.
None comes. The master remains still, fully present, neither affirming nor disputing. The hours pass. Evening light fades.
And a young monk enters quietly to light a lamp and tend the fire. The room grows warm, shadows shifting gently across the walls. Still, the master does not speak. The scholar's composure begins to strain. Accustomed to intellectual exchange, he presses harder, refining his points, sharpening his challenges. Yet the silence remains unbroken. Midnight passes. The attendants have long since withdrawn, but the scholar stays, driven by determination and pride. The fire burns low, embers glowing softly. As dawn nears, fatigue settles into his body, but his resolve persists. Finally, he poses what he believes to be his most essential question. Stripped of ornament and abstraction, what is the true nature of mind, beyond all concepts and formulations? At that moment, the master stands. He reaches for the iron poker resting by the hearth and holds it up between them. "Do you see this?" he asks. The sudden shift startles the scholar. "Of course I see it," he replies, confused that such a simple question would follow such a long night of inquiry. The master lowers the poker slightly. "If I were to say this is mind, would you accept it?" The scholar hesitates. "No, that would be absurd." "And if I were to say mind is separate from this, would that be correct?" Again, the scholar shakes his head, irritation rising. The master sets the poker down gently. "All night you have spoken of mind," he says calmly. "You have chased it through words and ideas, trying to grasp it as something to be defined or defeated. Yet when it appears plainly before you, you overlook it. Seeing is already complete. Thinking about seeing only creates distance." The scholar sits in stunned silence. The exhaustion, the long hours of argument, the simplicity of the gesture all converge. Something loosens. For the first time since arriving, his attention settles fully into the room, into the warmth of the fire, the quiet presence of the man before him. There is nothing to argue with here. The master resumes his seat. "Zen is not opposed to words," he continues softly. "Words are tools, useful when needed. But mistaking the map for the land leads only to confusion. When you are thirsty, reading about water does not quench your thirst. When you are cold, analysis of fire offers no warmth." As dawn light enters the room, the scholar bows deeply. He does not ask another question. Later, as he departs the temple, he leaves behind his confidence in intellectual supremacy, carrying instead a humility born of direct encounter. His writings will continue, but they will be shaped by a deeper silence. As you rest with this story, notice how easily understanding becomes entangled in effort. How often do we seek answers by accumulating explanations, while overlooking what is already present? The master did not defeat the scholar's arguments. He simply refused to enter them. In that refusal, another kind of clarity emerged. Let this reflection settle as your breath slows further. The body sinks more deeply into rest, supported without effort. Thoughts drift like embers cooling in the hearth, no longer demanding attention. There is nothing to resolve, nothing to complete. Just as the scholar discovered through exhaustion and stillness, clarity does not always arrive through conquest or control. Sometimes it reveals itself when striving falls away. When we finally stop insisting on understanding and allow ourselves to simply see, remain here in this quiet space between waking and sleep, where nothing needs to be named. Awareness is already present, steady and sufficient, holding everything without effort.
The scholar leaves the mountain temple as the first birds begin to call from the cedars. His steps are slower than when he arrived, not from fatigue alone, but from a subtle reorientation within. The path feels different beneath his feet.
Each stone distinct, each sound crisp in the morning air. The scrolls carried by his attendants seem lighter now, as though they no longer bear the full weight of truth he once placed upon them. In the weeks that follow, his life resumes its familiar rhythm of study, teaching, and writing. Yet something essential has shifted. When he opens the texts that once felt solid and authoritative, he senses a quiet space around the words. Meanings still arise, arguments still form, but they no longer claim absolute ownership of reality. There is an underlying stillness that remains untouched by agreement or refutation. When students approach him with questions, he listens more than he speaks. At times, he answers directly. At times, he pauses, allowing silence to do what explanations cannot. Some students feel unsettled by this change, others strangely relieved. Without announcing it, he has begun teaching from a different place. This, too, is how Zen moves through the world, not through conquest of ideas, but through subtle realignment, not by rejecting thought, but by releasing its tyranny. Understanding matures into something quieter, less eager to prove itself. As this story settles, you may notice how your own mind relates to effort, how often clarity is pursued through tension, through pushing, through the belief that one more insight will finally bring rest, and yet again and again. The deepest ease arrives when the search loosens its grip. Feel how the body already knows this. Muscles soften when they are no longer commanded. Breath deepens when it is allowed rather than controlled. Sleep comes not by force, but by permission. You are no longer listening to a story.
You are inside the same current that carried the merchant by the pond and the scholar by the fire. The current of letting go, the current of returning to what is already present.
There is nothing you need to do to rest more deeply. The body is doing this on its own. Each breath flows without instruction. Each heartbeat finds its rhythm without guidance. Even awareness itself does not need your help. Thoughts may still appear, fragments of images, or unfinished ideas. Let them drift as they wish. They are like ripples after a stone has already sunk, harmless movements on a surface that soon returns to stillness. Notice the sense of weight in your limbs. Gravity holds you effortlessly. The surface beneath you supports every part of your body without question. There is no need to hold yourself together. You are being held in this space. The distinction between practice and non-practice dissolves. There is no special state to maintain, no awareness to protect. Just as the Master suggested, this is not the abandonment of practice, but its quiet fulfillment. Sleep is not something you fall into. It is something you merge with. As the boundary softens, there is no observer left outside the experience, only rest, unfolding naturally. If images arise, let them come and go. If memories surface, let them pass like clouds. None of them require response. None of them interrupt what is already happening. You may sense moments where consciousness fades slightly, then returns. This gentle ebb and flow is natural. There is no need to follow it. Eventually, even noticing will fade. Before that happens, Allow one final understanding to settle, not as a thought,
but as a feeling. The peace you seek does not live at the end of effort. It has been quietly present beneath effort all along.
just as the pond returned to stillness after the ripples passed, just as the fire burned low after the long night, the mind too knows how to rest when left undisturbed. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs correction.
The breath slows further. The body grows comfortably heavy.
Awareness dims without disappearing, like a lamp turned low rather than extinguished. And now, there is nothing more to follow. Sleep is already here.
The young monk bows deeply, his breath still uneven from the climb. Master Goutet returns the bow with a simple nod and gestures for both of you to enter the hermitage.
Inside, the space is sparse. A low platform for sitting, a kettle hanging above the fire, a single window opening onto the vast sweep of mountains and sky.
Nothing here invites distraction. Everything points back to the immediacy of this moment. The monk introduces himself and explains the reason for his journey. He has practiced diligently for many years in well-regarded monasteries. He has studied koans, memorized sutras, and sat countless hours in meditation. Yet, despite all this effort, a sense of distance remains between him and what the teachings promise. I understand the words, he says carefully, but the truth they point to still feels just out of reach. Goutet listens without interruption. When the monk finishes, the master lifts the kettle from the fire and pours hot water into two simple bowls. He hands one to the monk, one to you. Steam rises slowly, filling the small room. The master says nothing. After a long pause, the monk grows uneasy. Master, he asks, what is the final teaching? What is the essence that cuts through all confusion?
Goutet looks at him steadily. Drink your tea.
The monk hesitates, then does as instructed. The tea is plain, almost bitter, warming as it moves through his body. When he looks up again, the master is watching him closely. When you were drinking, Goutet asks, where was the teaching?
The monk searches for an answer. In the tea, he offers uncertainly.
Goutet shakes his head. Too late.
Silence fills the hermitage once more. Outside, a wind moves through the trees,
carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. The monk's face tightens, frustration rising. I have crossed mountains to come here, he says. Surely there must be something more you can give me.
The master stands and slides the door open wider, revealing the valley below. Clouds drift slowly between the peaks. Look, he says simply. The monk looks. For a moment, his mind continues its habitual search, naming, comparing, evaluating. Then, gradually, something loosens. The effort to grasp falls away, replaced by a quiet, unforced seeing. There is just the vastness before him.
The cool air on his skin, the sound of his own breathing. Goutet speaks softly, almost as if to himself. You keep asking for something extra, an answer, a method, a confirmation. But reality is not hiding behind appearances. It is exactly what is appearing. The monk feels a strange mix of relief and embarrassment. All this time, he has been leaning forward, straining toward an imagined finish line. And yet here, nothing is being withheld. Nothing needs to be added. I do not understand, he admits. That is closer, the master replies. They sit together until the light begins to change. The monk's questions do not vanish, but they lose their sharp edge. They no longer demand immediate resolution. Instead, they rest lightly, like leaves, floating on water.
When it is time to leave, the monk bows again, more slowly this time. There is less urgency in his movement. As he turns to go, Gute offers one final remark.
When you return to your monastery, do not try to remember this place. Just sweep the floor when you sweep the floor. Eat when you eat. Feel your feet touch the ground. The monk departs down the narrow path, his figure gradually disappearing into the forest.
You remain a while longer, sitting in the quiet presence of the hermitage. Nothing dramatic has occurred, no thunderous insight, and yet something fundamental has been gently reoriented. This story, like the others, does not give you something new to hold on to. Instead, it loosens the grip of what you have been holding, again and again.
Zen points away from accumulation and toward simplicity, away from answers and toward intimacy with what is already here. So much of our suffering comes from living one step removed from experience. We think about life instead of meeting it. We interpret sensations rather than feeling them. We search for meaning while overlooking the quiet fullness of
the present moment. Gute's teaching is uncompromising in its simplicity. There is no hidden core behind experience, no final concept waiting to be grasped. The truth is not concealed. It is only ignored when attention drifts into abstraction. As you lie here now,
you may notice the same pattern in yourself. The mind might still be listening, evaluating, trying to extract something useful from these words.
That is natural. There is no need to stop it. Just notice it. Notice also the more immediate layer beneath the thoughts, the gentle rise and fall of your chest, the contact between your body and the surface supporting you, the subtle warmth or coolness of the air on your skin. None of this requires interpretation. None of it needs improvement.
In this directness, effort naturally subsides, not because you force it to, but because it is no longer necessary. Like the monk at the window, you may sense moments where the boundary between observer and experience softens.
There is just hearing, just breathing, just resting.
Zen does not promise escape from ordinary life. It invites full entry into it. The tea is just tea.
The mountain is just the mountain. And yet, when nothing extra is added, this simplicity reveals a depth that cannot be exhausted.
You do not need to remember these stories. You do not need to agree with them. You do not need to make sense of them before sleep arrives.
They are not instructions to follow, but mirrors reflecting what is already present. Let the mirror fade now. Your body knows how to rest. Muscles release in their own time. The breath slows without direction. Awareness dims gently, like twilight settling over the mountains. There is nowhere else to go, nothing else to understand. Just this soft descent into sleep, where even the need to rest disappears, and rest simply happens. The hermitage fades from view as the path carries you onward. Yet the quality of attention lingers, quiet and unforced.
There is no clear boundary between the stories you have witnessed and your own experience now. They flow together, like streams meeting in a single river, each contributing without announcing itself.
What these encounters share is not a doctrine or a technique, but a repeated invitation to stop standing outside your own life. Again and again. The masters respond not by adding explanations, but by removing the extra layer of commentary that keeps experience at a distance. Responsibility is eaten. Sleep is slept. Tea is drunk. A poker is seen. Truth is recognized wherever it appears, without concern for labels or ownership. Notice how this approach differs from the way we are often taught to improve ourselves. We usually assume that transformation requires accumulation.
More effort, more insight, more discipline, more knowledge. We imagine that one day, after enough practice,
we will finally arrive somewhere different from where we are now. Zen quietly undermines this assumption, not by arguing against it, but by revealing its subtle cost. The cost is separation. Separation from this breath, this sensation, this moment. When Dario consumed the consequence of his mistake, there was no residue left behind, no story to carry forward, no identity to defend. The act was complete. In contrast, when we cling to explanations or rehearse apologies internally, we keep the mistake alive long after the moment has passed. We continue feeding it with thought. Responsibility, in this deeper sense, is not about punishment or self-blame. It is about immediacy. Meeting what is here fully, without resistance. The same immediacy appears in Nanin's teaching. Tenno's exhaustion was not a failure, but a necessary unraveling. Only when effort reached its limit did something more fundamental reveal itself. Sleep could not be practiced because sleep does not belong to the doer. It happens when the doer steps aside. In that stepping aside, practice did not disappear. It became total. This pattern repeats in the encounter with the scholar. Intellectual brilliance was not rejected, but it had to be brought to its natural conclusion. The mind had to tire of its own circling. Only then could direct perception speak for itself. The poker did not deliver an answer. It exposed the habit of seeking answers where none were required. And in Gassan's simple recognition of truth across traditions, another layer fell away. The need to defend identity, to draw lines around belief, dissolved in the presence of genuine insight. Wisdom was not claimed. It was acknowledged. The lilies of the field bloomed without consulting doctrine. Truth spoke without concern for allegiance. These stories do not ask you to adopt a Zen identity or to reject other paths. They ask something quieter and more challenging. They ask you to notice where you are adding what is not needed, where you are holding back from full contact, where life is happening and you are standing slightly to the side, watching yourself live. As your body continues to soften, you may notice how naturally this letting go occurs when it is not forced. Muscles release because they are no longer being held. Thoughts slow because there is nothing urgent for them to solve. Attention widens without effort, like a hand unclenching. This is not a special state. It does not announce itself with certainty or fireworks. It is ordinary to the point of being overlooked. And yet, in its ordinariness, there is an intimacy that effort cannot manufacture. You may find that the mind still wants to grasp something from these reflections, a lesson, a takeaway. That impulse too can be included. There is no need to suppress it. Simply see it as another movement, another ripple. Like the stone in the pond, it spreads and fades on its own. What remains when the ripples settle is not emptiness in the sense of absence, but openness. A space where experience does not need to justify itself, where this moment is enough, not because it meets a standard, but because it is complete as it is. In this openness, compassion arises naturally, not as a moral requirement, but as a recognition. When the boundaries soften, the suffering of others is no longer abstract. It is felt. And from that feeling, response flows without calculation. The merchant did not need a formula once he saw the ripples. Generosity ceased to be a transaction and became an expression of understanding. The same principle applies inwardly. When you stop dividing experience into acceptable and unacceptable, spiritual and mundane, success and failure, something in you relaxes. You no longer need to be at war with yourself. Even mistakes become part of the path, fully digested when met without resistance. As sleep draws nearer, The stories no longer need to be followed sequentially. They blend into a single atmosphere, a tone rather than a narrative, a reminder rather than an instruction. Feel how the breath now moves on its own, unobserved for moments at a time. Feel how the weight of your body is fully supported, without effort on your part. The mind may drift, images rising and dissolving. This, too, is allowed. Zen does not ask you to remain alert during sleep. It asks you to trust the intelligence already at work, just as the body knows how to heal when given rest. Awareness knows how to return to itself when it is not constantly redirected. There is nothing you need to carry forward from this moment. No insight to remember. No understanding to preserve. If something resonates, it will return when needed. If it does not, nothing is lost.
Like the Master said, when you sleep, just sleep.
So let the final layer of effort dissolve. Let the listening fade into dreaming, and dreaming into deep, wordless rest. The teachings do not disappear. They simply stop needing to speak.
Everything is already in its place, and you are free to rest within it.
The silence deepens, not as an absence, but as a fullness that no longer asks to be filled. What came before does not conclude here. It simply loosens its shape.
The teachings do not end. They disperse, like warmth after a fire has burned low, still present, no longer visible. In this quiet, the mind may try one last time to organize what it has heard. It may attempt to trace a path, to decide what matters most, to secure something lasting before letting go.
This movement is familiar. It is how the mind has learned to survive. Yet even now, nothing needs to be settled. Understanding does not need to be finalized. Insight does not need to be named. Zen points not toward clarity as an object, but toward intimacy with what is already happening, the breath entering and leaving, the subtle hum of the body at rest. The way awareness shifts without instruction. None of this requires supervision. It unfolds on its own, quietly competent.
Think of how often life has already carried you through moments you could not plan. How many times the body knew what to do before the mind caught up.
Healing, adaptation, release. These processes were never under your control, yet they happened. Practice, in this deeper sense, is not about mastering life, but about trusting it.
The stories you encountered earlier were never meant to become beliefs.
They function more like mirrors. Each one reflects a different angle of the same invitation. Stop interfering with what already knows how to be. When effort falls away, what remains is not passivity, but responsiveness. Not confusion, but clarity without strain. When the monk ate responsibility, there was no drama. When the master spoke of sleep, there was no mystery. When truth was recognized across traditions, there was no competition. These moments appear simple because simplicity is what remains after unnecessary layers dissolve. You may notice now how thoughts come and go with less insistence. They still arise, but they do not demand engagement, like sounds in the distance. They pass through awareness without pulling you toward them. This is not something you are doing correctly. It is something that happens when doing relaxes. There is a gentleness here that cannot be forced. Gentleness toward the body, which no longer needs to be held rigid. Gentleness toward the mind, which no longer needs to perform. Gentleness toward experience, which no longer needs to justify itself.
In this gentleness, even restlessness is allowed. Even uncertainty is welcome. Nothing is excluded. The moment is wide enough to hold everything without collapsing.
Zen often speaks of returning to the ordinary mind, not the distracted mind nor the striving mind, but the mind before division, the mind that hears a sound and simply hears, The mind that feels tired and simply rests? The mind that meets pain without turning it into a story?
This ordinariness is not dull. It is alive, responsive, intimate. It is what remains when the need to be special dissolves. In this space, life does not feel like a problem to be solved, but like a movement to be felt.
As sleep approaches more closely, awareness may flicker. Images may surface briefly, then fade. Memories, fragments, half-formed thoughts drift by.
There is no need to follow them, no need to push them away. Like clouds crossing a wide sky, they pass without altering the sky itself.
This sky-like quality of awareness has always been present. It was never created by practice. Practice simply stopped obscuring it. And now, even practice can rest.
Nothing needs to be carried into sleep. No intention needs to be set. The body knows how to cross this threshold. You have done it thousands of times without instruction.
Zen does not ask you to remain mindful during dreaming. It does not demand vigilance. It trusts the natural rhythm of contraction and release, waking and sleeping,
engagement and rest. Wisdom is not lost when you sleep. It is integrated.
In the same way, you do not lose yourself when you let go. What falls away are the extra layers that were never essential. Roles soften. Identities loosen. What remains is simpler than expected.
Breathing continues. The heart keeps its steady rhythm. Muscles surrender their final holding. The boundary between inner and outer grows less distinct.
There is just experience, unfolding without commentary.
If there is a final teaching here, it is not one that can be repeated. It is a felt sense, a recognition that nothing is missing, that this moment, even as it fades into sleep, is complete. You do not need to arrive anywhere else. You do not need to become someone different. You do not need to hold on.
Like water finding its level, everything settles where it belongs. And in that settling,
there is peace, not because everything is perfect, but because nothing is being resisted. Rest now. Let awareness dim without fear.
The path does not disappear when you close your eyes. It simply becomes indistinguishable from the ground beneath you.
There is nothing more to do, nothing more to understand. Only this gentle descent into rest, carried by a life that knows how to hold you, even when you are no longer trying to hold it yourself.
The young monk bows deeply, his posture filled with respect and youthful urgency. He has traveled a long distance for this meeting, carrying questions that have grown heavier with every step.
He asks about the essential nature of Zen, about the truth the Buddha realized beneath the Bodhi tree. He waits, certain that a profound explanation will follow.
Perhaps a teaching wrapped in paradox, or drawn from ancient sutras.
Instead,
the master does something entirely unexpected. He slowly lifts his right hand and raises a single finger toward the sky. He says nothing. His expression remains calm, unadorned, yet utterly certain. The gesture hangs in the air, complete in itself. The monk waits, confused, expecting more. But nothing else comes. The finger remains raised, silent and unwavering. After a long moment, the monk bows again and withdraws,
uncertainty written across his face. You follow him as he walks toward a small meditation hut, set apart for visitors. Days pass. He sits in meditation, walks among the trees, returns to his cushion. Again and again, his thoughts circle the image of the raised finger. Is it pointing to the heavens? To unity? To some hidden meaning? Is it a symbol meant to be decoded, or is the gesture itself the teaching?
He approaches the master repeatedly, asking different questions, searching for clarification. Each time, regardless of what is asked, the response is the same. The finger rises. Nothing more. Slowly, the gesture begins to change its quality. It no longer feels like an answer withheld, but like something alive, something that resists being turned into an idea.
Weeks go by. The monk stays on, helping with daily tasks. He carries water from the stream,
Chops wood, prepares meals. His confusion remains, yet something in him begins to soften. The tight grip of his thinking loosens. He starts to move through his days with a quieter attention, less driven by the need to resolve the question. One morning, he encounters a wild-eyed boy from the nearby village who occasionally delivers supplies to the hermitage. The boy has heard of the master's teaching and,
with playful irreverence, raises his own finger when he sees the monk. He laughs, mimicking the gesture, treating it like a joke. You feel a flash of concern. The monk has struggled deeply with this teaching, and now it seems to be reduced to mockery.
Without hesitation, the monk reaches out and grabs the boy's extended finger, pulling it sharply. The boy cries out in pain, tears instantly forming.
As the child clutches his hand in shock, the monk leans close and raises his own finger, exactly as the master does. In that instant, something shifts.
The boy's expression changes, pain giving way to sudden clarity. No words are spoken, yet something unmistakable passes between them. The boy bows awkwardly, then runs off down the path, no longer laughing. That evening, as dusk settles over the plateau, the monk approaches the hermitage one last time. His presence is different now, grounded, unhurried. When the master opens the door, the monk bows and raises his own finger in silence.
The master studies him carefully, not the gesture but the man behind it. After a moment, a rare smile appears on his weathered face. They stand facing one another,
each with a single finger raised, mirroring each other perfectly.
Nothing is said, yet everything necessary has been conveyed.
The next day, the monk prepares to leave. As he sets off down the mountain path, the master lifts his finger once more in farewell. The monk bows and continues on.
Not looking back, he carries the presence of his teacher with him, not as a memory or concept, but as something alive within his own experience.
Years later, the monk becomes a teacher himself. When students come asking about the essence of Zen, he responds in the same way, a single finger raised. The teaching continues, not as philosophy or belief, but as a direct gesture pointing to what cannot be captured in words. This story reveals the heart of Zen transmission. The raised finger is not a metaphor to interpret or a symbol to analyze. It is an immediate expression of reality as it is, prior to explanation. The monk's initial questions reflect a common assumption that truth can be packaged into ideas. The response cuts through that assumption, pointing not to an answer but to direct experience itself. Understanding does not arrive through accumulating concepts. It emerges through lived moments that bypass thought entirely. The monk's realization comes not through analysis, but through action, through embodiment. The teaching stops being something to figure out and becomes something to live. As you rest, you can feel the physical reality of your own body, just as directly. The subtle warmth in your fingers, the quiet pulse beneath the skin, the connection between hand, arm, and breath. This immediate awareness is what the finger points toward, not explanation, but presence. Zen has always emphasized this direct transmission beyond words and texts. It can feel unsettling to a mind trained to seek instructions and guarantees. Yet no description of water can quench thirst. Only drinking satisfies.
As attention softens, imagine standing on that quiet mountain plateau. Feel the cool air, the spaciousness around you. When the finger rises,
do not search for meaning. Simply notice what is here. Sensation, breath, awareness itself. Like the monk, you may discover that what you were seeking was never hidden, only overlooked. The finger continues to point, here and now. Your body grows heavier, supported by the surface beneath you. Thought drifts, effort fades. The room around you gently recedes as awareness opens into another scene, another time, carrying the same quiet invitation into what comes next. Hot's teaching continues to unfold not as a doctrine but as a way of being. His sack, light yet inexhaustible, becomes a quiet mirror for the lives around him. Those who pass him on the road begin to sense that the freedom he embodies has nothing to do with escaping the world. It comes from meeting the world without resistance, without the extra weight of stories layered on top of simple experience. As you walk beside him, you notice how naturally he responds to each moment. When hunger appears, he eats whatever is offered without complaint or craving. When rain falls, he laughs and lets it soak his robes. When someone greets him with suspicion or mockery, his smile remains unchanged, not because he suppresses feeling, but because there is no inner argument to defend. Each encounter is complete in itself, needing no continuation. The monks who questioned him earlier remain in your awareness. Their lives are shaped by discipline, structure, and effort, all sincere and dedicated. Yet beside Hot, something in their seriousness seems slightly strained. As if they are carrying an invisible burden, Hot does not oppose their path, nor does he imitate it. He simply sets his sack down again and again, showing without words that the freedom they seek is already available when the unnecessary load is released. You begin to sense that the sack is not about possessions at all. It represents the mind's habit of collecting, holding, and rehearsing, regrets carefully folded and stored, fears tucked away for later, expectations polished and protected. None of these are inherently wrong, yet carrying them everywhere turns each step into effort. Hot carries only what this moment requires. Nothing more travels with him. As night falls on another day of wandering, you see him resting beneath an open sky. There is no sense of lacking, no sense of achievement. Stars appear one by one, reflected faintly in his open eyes before sleep comes. The world does not need to be different for him to be at ease. It is enough that it is. This ease does not dull his awareness. On the contrary, it sharpens it. When suffering appears, he does not turn away. He meets it directly, not as a problem to solve, but as something to accompany, a grieving farmer, a sick child, a weary traveler. Hot offers presence first, then whatever small action naturally follows. His joy is not a denial of pain, but the absence of resistance to it. You realize that this is why his sack never empties and never overflows. Giving and receiving are no longer opposites. When nothing is grasped, nothing is lost. The balance maintains itself without calculation. As this understanding settles, the marketplace fades and the sense of movement slows. Another scene begins to form, quieter, more intimate. You find yourself sitting beside a small stream at the edge of a forest. The water moves steadily over smooth stones, making no effort to be anything other than what it is. What eye leaves drift on the surface, some catching briefly before continuing downstream. A thought arises. then dissolves, much like a leaf passing through a patch of sunlight. There is no need to follow it. Breath comes and goes on its own. The teachings you have witnessed, Judge Oker's clever compassion, the black-nosed Buddha's hidden devotion, the raised finger pointing beyond words, the laughing monk with his endless sack, begin to feel less like separate stories and more like different expressions of the same quiet truth. Each points away from force and toward understanding, away from perfection and toward sincerity, away from accumulation and toward direct presence. None of them ask you to become someone else. They invite you to notice what is already here, beneath habit and striving. In this noticing, there is a gentle relief, the sense that you do not need to carry everything forward, that some burdens can be set down. If only for this breath, this moment. The future does not need to be solved. The past does not need to be reworked. Like hot beneath the tree, you can be here without a second sack. The sound of the stream becomes softer, blending with the rhythm of your breathing. Muscles release their subtle holding. The boundary between listening and sound begins to blur. There is just this flow, this presence, unbroken and sufficient.
If a question arises, it does not demand an answer. If an image appears,
it does not need interpretation. Like the raised finger, like the sack set gently on the ground, everything points back to the same simplicity. What is here? Before thought names it. Resting in this simplicity, sleep approaches not as something you must enter, but as something that arrives naturally when nothing resists it. Awareness dims without disappearing. The stories fade, leaving only their quiet echo,
not as lessons to remember, but as an atmosphere you can return to at any time.
For now, there is nothing to do, nothing to understand, nothing to carry. Just this moment unfolding exactly as it is, complete, unburdened, and at ease. The ease you are resting in does not belong to the night alone. It extends quietly into whatever follows, just as the teachings in these stories do not end with their final gesture. They continue wherever awareness meets life without obstruction. In this softness, another understanding begins to settle, not as an idea, but as a felt sense of trust in the unfolding of things. The wandering monk with the sack, the master with the raised finger, the silent teacher with the fire poker, none of them offer conclusions. They remove something instead, a layer of insistence, a demand that life explain itself before it can be lived. What remains is surprisingly gentle. As sleep draws closer, you may notice how the body already knows how to let go. Muscles soften without instruction. Breath deepens without effort. The mind, so practiced in doing, briefly remembers how to stop pushing. This is not an achievement. It is a return. In this return, the stories merge into one continuous movement. Different landscapes, different characters, yet the same invitation appears again and again. Look directly. Put it down. Be here. Nothing mystical is added. Nothing ordinary is removed. You sense now that Zen does not argue with the intellect. It simply does not place it at the center. Thought is allowed to arise, just as sound arises, just as sensation does. But it is no longer the ruler of experience. When thought relaxes its grip, awareness naturally opens. This openness is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It feels more like relief than revelation, like realizing you have been clenching your fist for hours and can finally let it open. The world does not change, yet everything feels lighter.
The figures from the stories lived this lightness in different ways. One through silence, one through laughter, one through a single finger raised again and again. None of them tried to convince. They trusted recognition to happen on its own.
And recognition does not belong only to monks or masters. It appears in ordinary moments when you stop leaning away from what is happening. When you feel the weight of your body supported by the bed. When you hear a distant sound without labeling it. When a thought fades and is not immediately replaced. In these small gaps, something spacious reveals itself.
Not empty in a cold sense, but open and accommodating. Everything can arise here without conflict. Joy, fatigue, uncertainty, peace, none of it needs to be fixed before rest is allowed.
The happy monk's sack rests again at your side. You sense how often you pick it up without noticing, planning, remembering, rehearsing, judging. Each movement subtle, automatic, and yet just as easily it can be set down, not forever, just for now. There is no rule about when to carry it and when to release it. Wisdom shows itself in sensitivity, not rigidity. Carry what is needed for this moment. When it is no longer needed, let it go. This simple rhythm does not require discipline so much as honesty. As awareness continues to soften, the boundary between teaching and experience dissolves. There is no lesson being delivered anymore,
only a quiet companionship with what is unfolding. You are not being led anywhere. You are being left exactly where you are. In this stillness, even understanding becomes unnecessary. The mind may try to summarize, to hold on to something useful, but there is nothing here that can be possessed. It can only be lived. Sleep approaches like a gentle tide, not pulling you under, just lifting the edges of effort until they float away.
Images loosen. Thoughts slow. Sensations blur into warmth and heaviness. Somewhere in this drifting, the raised finger is still present. Not as an image, but as immediacy. The sack is still here. Not as a concept,
but as a choice. The poker is still warm, not as a symbol, but as direct contact. These are not memories. They are reminders embedded in experience itself. Whenever awareness touches life without commentary, the teaching is already happening.
You do not need to remember these stories tomorrow. You do not need to repeat them. Their function is complete the moment they bring you back to what is already here.
Breath continues. The body rests. The mind settles into a wide, receptive quiet. Nothing is missing. Nothing is being held.
And in this simplicity, rest deepens naturally, without effort, without instruction, just as it always has. Neither excess nor denial, only what supports the path. This is the quiet balance the wandering monk embodies. His sack, endlessly giving yet never depleted, receiving yet never burdened, reveals a truth known across many wisdom traditions. When generosity flows from joy instead of duty, abundance replaces scarcity. When giving is not calculated and receiving is not claimed as a right, life moves in a rhythm that cannot be measured by loss or gain. This rhythm appears again in the way he speaks to the child beneath the tree. Rather than offering abstractions or lofty ideals, he points to something tangible, the image of a second sack. In doing so, he brings a subtle teaching into a form that even a young mind can feel and recognize. His laughter at her question is not indulgence, but respect. He knows insight does not belong to age, status, or training. It arises wherever attention is sincere.
The encounter with the disciplined monks sharpens this contrast.
Their devotion to form and lineage is real, Yet it initially blinds them to the living truth standing before them. They mistake joy for immaturity, freedom for carelessness. Only when the sack is set down, when no explanation is offered, does recognition dawn. What years of ritual and study aim to cultivate is suddenly visible in a single, effortless gesture. As rest draws nearer, attention naturally turns inward. You may sense your own second sack, the weight of regret replayed, worries rehearsed, identities protected, futures planned in advance. None of these are inherently wrong. Yet carried constantly, they pull awareness away from the quiet sufficiency of now. The invitation is simple. Put it down, not by force, not through discipline, but by noticing its presence and choosing to rest where you already are. In this resting, a natural contentment appears, not as excitement, but as ease. Joy reveals itself not as something achieved, but as something uncovered when unnecessary effort relaxes. Like the laughing monk, you may discover that what you have been seeking was never distant. It has been waiting in the simple act of arriving. As the body softens further, imagination drifts to a mountain temple in another age. Morning mist curls through pine branches, and a modest hall rests quietly among them. Here, a teacher known for clarity and kindness receives those who come, seeking guidance. His strength is steady, his manner unforced. He meets each visitor without comparison, offering exactly what is needed, nothing more. Two figures arrive, different in age, appearance, and background. One carries years of training, scriptures memorized, techniques refined. His posture is precise, his mind sharp with questions shaped by doctrine. The other carries the marks of labor and weather, hands shaped by work rather than study. He brings no texts, only a simple meal wrapped in cloth. The younger is received first. His question is carefully formed, shaped by years of thought. He wonders how it can be said that even grass and trees awaken. Plants do not think, do not meditate, do not strive. How could they realize anything at all? The teacher listens, not with judgment, but with gentle curiosity. His response does not explain or refute. Instead, it turns the light back toward the questioner. Of what use is it to speculate about grass and trees? The real matter is your own awakening. The words land quietly, unsettling the familiar ground of analysis. The monk senses that pressing for clarification would only circle the same territory. He withdraws, thoughtful, not rejected, but redirected. Then the older man enters. His question carries no theory. It carries uncertainty and hope. Can someone without education or formal practice understand what lies at the heart of this path? The teacher does not answer directly. He asks instead about the journey up the mountain, about the trees along the path. Were they withholding their beauty? Did they ask for credentials? The meaning arrives without effort. The natural world gives freely, expressing itself without striving or self-doubt. So too with Buddha nature. It is not earned, it is not granted, it is lived. Grass and trees do not worry about enlightenment, they do not aim for it. They simply are. In that simplicity, their nature shines unobstructed. The older man understands at once. What concepts could not deliver, lived experience makes clear. He leaves with lightness, while the younger monk, watching from the courtyard, feels something shift. The teaching he struggled to grasp through thought has just been spoken plainly, without philosophy. This moment reveals the heart of the path. Awakening is not an addition. It is a recognition. Not something achieved in the future, but something revealed when striving relaxes.
The question of how plants awaken dissolves when it is seen that awakening is not a process, but an expression. As awareness drifts closer to sleep, reflection turns gently toward your own life. Where has understanding become more important than presence? Where has thinking replaced seeing? Perhaps practice has remained an idea, or mindfulness a concept admired from a distance. Perhaps answers have been sought where simple attention would suffice.
The invitation offered by these stories is not
To abandon thought, but to release its dominance. Concepts have their place, yet they are maps, not the ground beneath your feet. Direct experience has a clarity no explanation can replace.
Grass grows toward the sun without instruction. Trees stand rooted without self-consciousness. In their quiet way, they express what needs no improvement. This same nature is not separate from you. It is present in the awareness that notices breath,
Sensation, sound. It has never been absent. As the final images soften, there is nothing left to do, no lesson to remember, no insight to hold. The stories have completed their work by pointing back to what is already here. Like seeds in soil, their meaning will unfold on its own.
Rest now in this natural presence. Nothing needs to be achieved. Nothing needs to be resolved. Awareness settles as the body sleeps.
Unburdened, sufficient, complete.
Night deepens without announcement. The world does not signal the moment it crosses from evening into true darkness, and neither does the mind when it releases its last effort.
One thought fades, then another, and soon there is only a quiet field where nothing is being managed. In this space, stories do not end. They simply transform, becoming less about instruction and more about recognition.
Long ago,
in a coastal village shaped by wind and salt, there lived a woman known for her patience. She was not a teacher, nor did she speak of doctrines. Each morning she rose before the sun to mend nets and prepare rice, her movements steady, her attention unbroken. People passed her daily without remark,
assuming nothing unusual rested there. Yet those who sat beside her for a time noticed something difficult to name.
In her presence, rest came easily. One afternoon, a traveler arrived carrying exhaustion more than luggage. His clothes were worn, his eyes sharpened by years of seeking. He had studied with many teachers, practiced austerities, memorized passages meant to unlock hidden truths. Still, rest eluded him. He asked the villagers where wisdom could be found.
And someone, almost as an afterthought, gestured toward the woman by the shore. He approached with polite skepticism.
What could someone so ordinary offer? He greeted her and waited for guidance. She did not look up immediately. She finished tying a knot,
then set the net aside. When she finally met his gaze, there was no assessment, no attempt to impress, only presence.
He asked his question carefully, as though precision might yield a better answer. How does one let go of desire without falling into emptiness? How does one remain in the world without being bound by it? She listened fully, nodding once, then returned to her work. After a moment, she handed him a bowl of rice.
Eat, she said simply. Confused, he hesitated. He had not come for hospitality. He had come for understanding. Seeing his pause, she smiled gently, not amused, not impatient. The rice will cool, she said. Eat while it is warm.
He obeyed, if only to be polite. As he ate, something unexpected happened.
His attention dropped from the endless turning of questions into the simple act of chewing. Taste emerged. Warmth spread through his body. For the first time in days, perhaps years, he noticed hunger leaving without being replaced by craving.
When he finished, she took the bowl and washed it. No further explanation followed. The silence stretched, not awkward, not heavy, just wide. Eventually, he realized that nothing more was coming. Whatever he had hoped to extract could not be carried away as an answer.
He left the village unsettled yet lighter. Days later, the meaning began to surface on its own. Letting go was not an act performed by will. It happened naturally when attention returned to what was already here. Desire loosened its grip not through resistance, but through fulfillment of the present moment.
As these impressions drift through awareness now,
there is no need to analyze them. Understanding does not deepen through effort at this hour. It ripens quietly, like fruit left undisturbed on the branch. The mind, accustomed to grasping, may reach out one last time. Let it. Then allow it to rest. Another scene appears, faint but steady. A narrow path winding through autumn woods. Leaves fall without ceremony, covering the ground in colors that do not compete. Each leaf releases when the time arrives, not consulting the others, not delaying out of sentiment. The tree does not mourn what leaves. It trusts the cycle it has always known. Walking this path, you may notice how the body knows what the mind forgets. Breath adjusts without instruction. Balance maintains itself without commentary. Even fatigue serves a purpose, guiding you toward rest. There is intelligence here that does not speak in words. Many who seek clarity believe it must feel dramatic, accompanied by revelation or certainty. Yet clarity is often quiet. It feels like simplicity, like no longer carrying questions that were never necessary. Like seeing that what you are has never been separate from what you seek.
Teachers throughout time have pointed to this in different ways. Some through silence, others through paradox, others through ordinary acts, performed with full attention.
The form changes, but the essence remains. Presence cannot be taught, only recognized. As the body grows heavier, the boundary between story and sensation softens. Images dissolve into feeling. Meaning becomes less conceptual, more atmospheric. There is nothing to remember, nothing to hold. What remains is a gentle awareness that does not require participation. If sleep arrives, let it come. If wakefulness lingers, let that be enough. In either case, nothing is missing. The path is not ahead of you. It unfolds exactly where you are, in the quiet agreement to be as you are.
The night holds everything without preference, so can you?
Before dawn, when even birds hesitate to break the silence, the world feels suspended between breaths. This in-between hour carries a particular softness, as though existence itself is listening. In such stillness, effort naturally falls away. Nothing asks to be improved. Nothing waits to be resolved. Awareness rests like water in a bowl, neither reaching nor withdrawing. There is an old image of a bell hanging in an empty hall. No hand strikes it. No wind passes through. Yet it holds the potential to sound, complete in itself. The bell does not wonder when it will ring. It does not rehearse its purpose. It simply hangs, present, receptive. When the moment comes, the sound arises without hesitation, then fades without regret. Human life is not so different. Much of the tension we feel comes from forgetting this simplicity. We strike ourselves repeatedly with thoughts of what should be happening. What should have happened already? We pull the rope again and again, demanding resonance, unaware that the bell rings best when touched lightly. In another time, A small hermitage stood at the edge of a field. Its keeper was known for spending long hours gazing out the window, appearing idle to those who passed. Visitors sometimes asked what practice he followed. He answered without turning his head. "I sit," he said. "When tired, I rest. When hungry, I eat. When thoughts come, I let them go." Some left disappointed, believing they had encountered a man who had nothing to teach. Others lingered, watching how his attention never wavered from what was actually happening. They noticed how even silence felt full around him, how ordinary actions seemed complete. One visitor, more insistent than the rest, pressed him for something more refined. Surely there must be a deeper method, a secret beyond this plainness. The keeper smiled faintly and pointed to the field. "Do you see the grass growing?"
he asked. "Does it strain upward? Does it worry about height? Growth happens because conditions are present. Nothing more is required."
The visitor followed the gesture, watching the grass move gently in the breeze. In that moment, understanding did not arrive as a thought. It arrived as a release, something unclenched. The need to search loosened, replaced by a quiet permission to stop. As this story settles now,
you may feel a similar loosening. It does not demand recognition. It may pass unnoticed, like the body adjusting its position during sleep.
Yet even unnoticed, it leaves a trace. Less pressure, more space. Life often feels difficult, not because it is complex, but because it is continually resisted. Moments are compared against imagined alternatives. Experience is filtered through expectation. When this resistance softens, even briefly, ease emerges naturally, not as pleasure, but as alignment. Consider how often attention drifts toward what is absent, what is missing, what might come next. Rarely does it rest fully with what is already complete. And yet, completeness is not something added. It is revealed when attention stops dividing experience into acceptable and unacceptable parts. The teachings carried through these stories do not ask for belief. They ask for noticing. Noticing breath entering and leaving. Noticing tension arising and dissolving. Noticing the moment when effort drops on its own. In these small recognitions, a larger truth becomes evident. Nothing essential has ever been lacking. As the body sinks further into rest, the sense of a separate observer grows faint. Sounds come and go without commentary. Sensations rise and fall without ownership.
Thought slows, no longer narrating each shift. Awareness remains, open, uncomplicated.
Somewhere within this openness, fear loses its footing. Anxiety, fed by imagined futures, finds no material here. Regret, sustained by replayed pasts,
has nothing to cling to. What remains is simply presence, steady and impartial.
This presence does not belong to anyone. It is not personal. It does not announce itself as insight or awakening. It is the same presence that has always been here, watching seasons change, watching breaths come and go, watching lives unfold and dissolve. In sleep, this presence does not disappear. It rests with the body, holding dreams lightly. In waking, it opens again to sound and light. It has never been confined to special states. It has always accompanied you, unnoticed precisely because it is so constant. As night moves toward morning, or as rest deepens further, there is nothing left to do, no instruction to follow, no meaning to extract. The stories have done their work by dissolving back into silence, pointing without pointing.
Let the mind drift where it will. Let the body settle as it knows how. Trust the intelligence that does not speak, the wisdom that does not argue, the clarity that does not explain itself.
Like the bell in the empty hall, you are complete, even in stillness. Like the grass in the field, you grow without effort. Like the night sky, you hold everything without strain. Rest here,